FaceTime?
Let's stick it in my face.
I don't know anything about them, in all honesty.
Katie and I found ourselves in different venues for wrestling, and so we would FaceTime each other because the school usually had Wi-Fi.
All right, I'm going to call the April 26, 2021 school board meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody. We'll do a quick roll call of members.
Eddie Vanami present.
Sarah Hughes, present.
Roger Canoy, present.
Jeremy Mask, present.
Cindy Cassidy, present.
Okay. All right, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to review the I-35 mission statement and district policies. The mission statement says the Interstate 35 Community School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. Our district policies are as follows. Number 1, articulate and support a cohesive, student-centered pre-K through 12 vision for continuous school improvement. Number 2, engage in effective teaching and relevant learning for the 21st century. And number 3, operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. Everybody should have received the agenda. It does require a motion and a second to approve the agenda. I would like to offer an amendment to the agenda. I would like us to move the number 4, the education spotlight, up to the next item before the open forum.
I will second that motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we move the education spotlight up 1 and the open forum down 1. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. So we will go ahead and start with the education spotlight.
So today we have a couple of our science fair participants from last week. So this was 6th grade. So if you want to come up, you actually can come up on the stage and show the school board what you did. And then you can kind of, if we have questions, they'll ask you questions. But if you want to just come up and explain what your project was. Mr. Weilbacher is the sponsor for 6th grade science fair, and he had a track meet tonight. So he is with middle school group at track meet. So.
Okay.
We can put it right here.
So my name is Ellie Vanderwerf, and my science fair project is about popcorn fluffiness and probabilities.
You want to just go back and you can talk. Then everybody can hear.
What brand of popcorn pops the most fluffy and has the least amount of unpopped kernels remaining? I thought that Jolly Time was going to be the fluffiest and had the least amount of unpopped kernels remaining, and I was right on half of that. Jolly Time had the least amount of unpopped kernels remaining. Orville Redenbacher was the fluffiest, and the second fluffiest was Pop Secret. The third fluffiest was Market Pantry Target. The third fluffiest was Jolly Time, I think. The fourth or the fifth fluffiest was Snappy, and the sixth fluffiest was Great Value. If you want to buy popcorn for how much it is, I would buy Great Value because it is only 5 cents per ounce. If you want the fluffiest, then I'd buy over Redenbacher, but it's 12 cents per ounce. If you want to buy like both, I would buy Market Pantry because it placed third in fluffiness and it had one on pop kernel remaining. It was 6 cents per ounce. My result is that I figured out that Orville Redenbacher was the fluffiest. Market Pantry is the best to buy, and Jolly Time had the least amount of on-pop kernels remaining.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were done, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. What was your favorite popcorn?
My favorite popcorn is Market Pantry.
Market Pantry? And where can I get Market Pantry popcorn?
And Target.
In Target.
Any more questions?
So was there any facts that you learned about popcorn that really
Yes.
surprised you when you were going through your research?
So it can fly up to 3 feet in the air. Wow. The National Popcorn Day is January 19th, and it takes 1,016 popcorn kernels to fill up in 1 cup.
Wow.
Wow.
Can you remind us what place you got?
I got third.
You got third. And I think I heard this, but how did you decide to do this project?
So my mom actually did this in 4th grade. So and she had the idea to do this.
So was yours better?
Yes.
When you talked to your mom, did she tell you that like her results were a lot different than what you found? Because I mean, technology's changed, and I'm sure the way they formulate the bags and things like that's changed.
Yeah, it did change. Because hers was a Jolly Time, it was the fluffiest. And Orville Redenbacher is the fluffiest for me.
And these were all microwave popcorn?
It was air popcorn.
Air pop, okay.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Ellie.
Yeah,
Thank you
you.
very much. Good job.
Good job.
Yeah, right up here.
Yeah, I would just, if you could maybe take us through your hypothesis, we're just here to learn from you about what your science fair project was and how you got the idea. Anything you'd like to highlight? And thank you for being here, by the way.
My name is Anna. I wanted to test how do different cigarettes directly affect the healthiness of the human body. I wanted to see which type of cigarette brand would have the worst effect on cotton balls in that represent the lungs. Do I see how I did?
Yeah, what was your hypothesis?
I expected that it would. Burn and do the same thing it would to the human lungs as it would if a normal person would smoke. It actually did collect some of the tar that it would on the human lungs. I expected that it would collect tar and it would form a blackish, brownish color on the cotton balls.
And how did you test it? You know, did you smoke all these? No. Okay, good. How did yeah? I thought the way you explained it at the science fair was really interesting. I think everybody would benefit from how you tested it.
I bought 3 different 2-liter containers. Of course, someone had to drink them.
Yeah.
Not me, of course. I bought 3 different containers. I took off the bottom. I drilled 2 holes in them, and then I used a hose and to kind of like a vacuum to go out to inhale like the human
Yep.
would. And I put in 100 cotton balls each, and I put a cigarette in and I lit it and then turned it on. It would pull the smoke out like it would in human inhaling.
Yep.
And after, this is 1 pack each on each bottle. I used, of course, sealer to make sure that the smoke wouldn't get out, and I used other precautions to make sure I wouldn't secondhand smoke. So that'd be a bad thing. And after I had done all the cigarettes, I let them sit out for a day, and then I went through and counted how many of them had actual brown or was affected. And that's how I determined what percent of it was.
And what were your results?
My results were that the Marlboro actually did have the worst effect on all of them because it has not much of a filter as the others. What I'm saying is they on other cigarette brands they use a filter. On the menthol, they do not. They use a small. It's kind of like a filter, but it's not.
And so which one of these, did you base your results on what they look like, how they look, right? And so if you could walk us through which bag is which.
This is the worst kind. It's menthol. It actually is, like I said earlier, it collected actual tar that goes on the lungs. I went through and I counted each and every cotton ball, and I separated them out of every 100 to see which one had the most
And how did you figure out what you wanted to do? Like, how did you determine this is what you were interested in for your project?
A teacher, a class that I was recently in, had a smoking project, and I was interested in it, so I tried it, and then the science fair came up about a month later, and I saw that this was an option. I wanted to do it.
That's cool. I've been kind of asking all the questions. I'm sorry about that.
It sounds like you had a preview.
Well, I did. I got one in 6th grade too.
So when you were doing this, did you have to pay for the cigarettes? I mean, cigarettes are expensive.
Yes, I got my father to pay for them.
When you were counting the cotton balls, were you surprised by anything as you were handling them and dealing with them?
I did not like the smell, of course. I don't think anyone did. Yes, I actually thought that the Camel would have the worst effect because my father he works in the hospital, and he said that usually when he treats people, it's usually the Camel that causes the worst effect on people's lungs. Well, when he treats them, they usually smoke the Camel the most.
And could you remind us what you got in the science fair?
I got first place.
You got 1st place. Good job.
Congratulations.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Anybody have any other questions?
No.
Thank you. That was
Thank
good.
you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah.
All right, that puts us at the open forum. I'm going to read our open forum statement before we get started. Residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. I think what we're going to do is ask that when you speak, you make it to a microphone. Is that we've got one right here and we got one in the back there. And I'm just going to start with the top of the list here. Tina Burkett.
what? Is it working?
That's good.
Yep. There we go. I just want to ask about the board policy that we're looking at changing regarding our dress code, specifically the hats. I'm asking to not change the policy as a staff member. Number one, I see it to be a security issue, especially right now when we're wearing masks and we have to look at the security cameras to identify students, whether it be for something bad or just quarantining. It's very difficult when they're wearing hats to identify students. The second reason is I've always viewed it as a respect thing. When students come into the building, it's a way of respecting the building. The staff, I guess maybe that's just how I was brought up. And number three, it's an accountability thing. I know this has been a long year and we're all tired of enforcing things, especially masks. Although, I mean, we have to for student safety. So I'm just asking, hang on, let's get through the year, don't make the policy change, please. And one more thing. I did take the time to search policies for surrounding schools and schools in the WCAC, our conference, and every one of them I looked up have a no hat policy, just like us.
Thank you, Tina. All right, if I mispronounce a name, I'm going to apologize up front here. Peg Herman.
Hello. My concern is the mask wearing. I have a real concern about the mask wearing. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We're good.
In doing my research, I'm finding out the science tells us that masks may result in increased risk of infection. There is no direct evidence on the effectiveness of universal masking of healthy people. Excessively wearing a mask is dangerous. Cloth masks should not be recommended. All masks, including medical masks, are not effective. Masks do not prevent virus respiratory illnesses. Wearing a mask to prevent spreading the virus is like putting a chain link fence to keep mosquitoes out. Risks outweigh the benefits. Masks are not effective, unnecessary, and harmful. Your CO2 inhalation is increased to dangerous levels. Your mask is a Petri dish experiment. A Danish study has proven that masked subjects were infected at the same rate as unmasked subjects. In my research, I'm looking at scientific information and not opinions. So anything I'm looking at is not opinion-based, it's scientific. And behind the mask wearing, there is a lot of information out there to go back and forth on the effectiveness of wearing masks, but this is where you must use your God-given discernment. Are they basing their information as part of their political agenda, or is this based on actual scientific information that shows how truly harmful this is to our children, physically, emotionally, and physically, psychologically, sorry. And to me, it's just common sense. I mean, if this topic weighs heavily on your heart, then I urge you to do what is right for our children's sake. I did have an example of children that went to school in a North Texas school. They never wore masks, period, during the whole pandemic. They had community meetings with their school board. It was agreed that they just didn't want to do it, but there were people that wanted the mask, so they gave them an option. So they went through several meetings. I'm trying to summarize it, so let me look at my notes. Our decisions were not made in a vacuum, but rather were input from our community and school board. We took several steps starting in July to achieve our goal, which focused on getting our kids back in school on time and in a traditional manner. No one can argue that our children need to be in school, and the social interactions are just as important as the academics we teach. We have had an excellent and normal year with the success in classroom and on the playing fields and courts. Our kids are happy and healthy. Our average daily attendance is the same as it was during this time last year. This was done in March, I believe. An approach of partnering with our community and parents to use common sense, personal responsibility, and faith over fear has worked well for us. When someone gets sick, they simply stay home, get well, and return. We welcome and love anyone who wants to wear a mask and those who do not. Our parents have done an excellent job in keeping their children home when they are sick. We've met and all have agreed to move forward on the same page with getting our kids back to school. This was based on the data that still holds true today. People under the age of 19 are not affected by COVID, and they do not spread it easily among themselves or to adults. For all the other age groups up to 70, the survival rate is still at 99.9%. There are studies out there that show masks make no significant difference in the spread of the virus, but have other detrimental effects. Furthermore, almost the entire medical community is now in agreement that the COVID protocols for children have had much greater detriment than COVID itself. The parent survey went out, and the admin, they met again and reviewed survey results, and it was clear that their community wanted to make masks a choice. So they had that option for anybody that wanted to wear it, but those that didn't want to, it was fine. So the first day back to school, any students and staff not wearing a mask took home the exemption form to fill out and brought it back. It was signed by the parents, brought it back. The Texas governor's order allows for several exemptions, 2 of which are medical and religious. Medical exemptions are also protected by the ADA and do not require any documentation. Anyone not wearing a mask at school is assumed to have an exemption, and we do not ask any questions. This is where choices come in. After a full semester and we head into March, we have required no quarantines, canceled no events, and have few people choosing to wear a mask, which we welcome and love just as much. Our enrollment is up 1,400 students total, and our daily attendance is the same average we had last year. We had 0 COVID cases through the first 10 weeks of school and currently have 0 now.
Ms. Herman?
Pardon?
Your 5 minutes is expired. Emily Lewis?
Hi, I'm Emily Lewis. I have a special needs child in your preschool currently. I think it was right before they came back from Thanksgiving break, the policy came out that all children would be wearing masks. I had emailed his teacher and asked if this applied to my student, as he has a medical exemption for his mask. He has severe communication issues. I was called by some staff at your school, a female who is over all of you, and she was trying to get me to agree to put a mask on my child over and over again. She's like, why can't we try this? Why can't we try that? This is ridiculous. My child should not be wearing a mask. He is medically exempt. The fact that you guys are still requiring this is absolutely ridiculous. This does not affect children that much, especially preschoolers. I was on Facebook the other night, and I found from the Madison County Supervisor this post that she had written. I have been receiving inquiries on what county supervisors can do regarding the mask mandates in schools. Please note that school boards are a separate elected office, and these representatives are the only ones who can determine mask policy in the school district. I did confirm with the Iowa Department of Education that they currently have no policy mandating masks, only a recommendation that schools follow the guidance of the CDC, the Iowa Department of Health, and the County Board of Health, none of whom have any statutory authority regarding masks. Therefore, this policy rests solely with your elected school board. I'm asking you to remove this ridiculous policy of masking all these students. I was supposed to have another child in your preschool this year, and I refused to send him. He has no medical exemption. I know plenty of children, young children, who have had bacterial infections, like tons of them, and they are being still forced to wear masks. They have medical exemptions, and even kids that don't, they should not be wearing masks. My child will not be coming to your school next year if there's still a mask policy in place.
Thank you. Sherry Colbaum? Colbaum?
Can you hear me?
Did I pronounce your name incorrectly?
Yeah, it's Sherry Colbaum.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to start out with we really have been pleased with I-35 for the past few years. Our daughter was excelling pre-COVID, and her teacher kept doing virtual meetings, and she went above and beyond last spring. This year, our liaison has been doing great. Going in, though, I knew virtual would not work for us, so I gave my kids two choices: homeschool or go to school masked. My son chose to go to school masked to see his friends. He was promised mask breaks. He didn't get them. I was told the same kid received mask breaks every day. He went virtual when there was a threat of detention, or 2 weeks virtual without properly wearing the mask. We went all summer not wearing a mask and continue to do so today. I want the mask to be optional. Virtual inconveniences our household, and we won't be doing it next year. It consists of interruptions, and not all are because my son doesn't have his work done. I was contacted 7 times this week. 2 of the contacts this week were because there was a book in the office. 2 were for a test and upcoming work. 1 was a phone conversation with a PE teacher who couldn't even tell me his expectations for virtual students. 1 teacher asked about a late assignment, and the last was scheduling the standardized testing. Every time he's wanted on a Friday, I have to arrange for a bus pickup. It's constant tracking and more work than what it's really necessary. We're virtual all because of the punishing him for wearing a mask, not covering his nose. What works is staying home if you're sick. We will not do virtual next year. If you're pushing your political mask policies on these kids next year, we won't be here. We'll be 100% homeschool. And I'm guessing I'm not alone. We'll not be in any online program again. The kids are not skilled to be virtual learners. They need to be in school. I need to know what is the decision on the mask mandate, because it's not based off any guidance. The governor's pulled her mandate. The CDC recommends it. They don't require it. I'm asking for a decision on the mask for the 21-22 school year now. I need to know who's planning their curriculum, your wonderful group of teachers or myself. So seeing everybody here, I know I'm not alone. And so I'm just guessing with a raise of a hand, I would like to see who is in favor of making the mask optional now and next year. With a raise of the hand, who wants to know if the mask will be required for next year by the end of May? And my last question is regarding virtual or remote. And I'm just curious, who is in support of remote learning at I-35? So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa Keller.
Can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I know that I am one of many parents with the same concerns and requests. For an entire school year, our children have had to cover their smiles, not have the full and mental, emotional interaction with friends and teachers. The excessive quarantine is starting to show the effects. Our children need to be in school full-time to receive a quality education so they can be prepared to go out into the world. Numerous surrounding school districts have already made the decision and have communicated to allow optional masks for children and teachers for the upcoming school year. I would challenge our school board to decide and communicate no later than May 31st, so parents and kids can prepare. I'm also requesting that a public forum be added before the end of this school year. We have gone around the curve more than once, feeling like we're in a mousetrap. It is the time to accept that all of our children have been exposed, whether in riding to school with a sibling, touching a door at school, wrestling a boy on the mat, or giving your best friend a hug because it's their birthday. It is time to bring some common sense back to that this virus will pass. Our kids should not have to suffer any more academically and emotionally to a virus that has very little impact on our children. We can't go back and change the past year, but it is time to reflect on what did not work and look towards what steps that you as decision makers can make to bring normalcy back to this school. It has been mentioned to me that once a vaccine comes out for our children, the unmasking would be a consideration. The vaccine is an experimental medical protocol authorized under the Emergency Use Authorization Act. It cannot be mandated during human medical clinical trials, which are through 2023. This should not be a solution in any decision factors the board members make. I'm not here to argue whether you or your family make the choice to take the vaccine. I'm here to stand up for freedom of choice for our kids as well as our teachers to choose to wear a mask or for parents to choose to take a vaccine. It has been referenced that the board uses the CDC to determine their decisions. The CDC is only a recommendation, not a governing arm. Clearly, this is a standard auto response when we can see other schools stepping up and moving forward to getting kids back in school full-time with a mask-wearing personal option. I also understand that the value in having data. Data can only be used if it was asked in a clear and unbiased approach. This past survey, for many reasons, had misleading questions and therefore cannot be a precise and accurate data for any decisions. Do we actually have data to support the strict quarantine restrictions? Many parents are missing their child's sports events tonight to be here to support and to be a voice, me included. I would kindly ask that you take a hard look at the faces tonight, make a decision to vote no on the mask mandate, and give this as an optional personal choice of freedom, and communicate no later than May 31st. Again, I would ask you that to schedule a public forum for parents prior to the end of the school year. And lastly, as Thomas Jefferson once said, the good sense of the people will always be found to be the best army. They may be led astray for a moment, but will soon correct themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Tucker Keller.
A student's perspective. I believe that masks are currently an obstacle that students and staff of Interstate 35 are dealing with is unnecessary and can be dealt with differently. Masks may or may not help slow down or eventually spread germs and whatnot. but making everyone wear masks makes each and every day feel as if a dictatorship government is in charge. No one wants to walk around with an uncomfortable facial covering on their face. Mask mandates really put teachers into a situation where they're forced to follow the rules of making kids wear masks. Not one single teacher, I believe, wants to create conflict with a student over masks. They don't want to have to get a student in trouble because of masks. If masks were optional, everyone would have the opportunity to do what they please and less conflict would be had. Making everyone wear masks is taking individual rights away from them. Next, lunch is just another example of silly rules being went through with throughout school days. Having to wear a mask while in the lunch line and getting food, then being able to take them off once sat down doesn't make much sense. Letting students sit next to each other, but only 3 or 4 at a table is nonsense too. Please allow masks to be optional next year. Students will enjoy school much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucky. Jessica Buckland.
Can you hear me? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to change the topic a little bit for a second. I'm speaking tonight in regards to standard-based grading, or I'll refer to it as SBG from here on out. I became aware the school was considering changing this to this grading system via the community and was asked by some to speak on it tonight. Hearing SBG was a surprise to me for many reasons, but mainly that this had not been communicated to the community by the school. I wasn't sure if this was a rumor or not, but once I spoke with some I-35 staff, I found it to be factual. As an educator myself and a current high school teacher in our neighboring community of Osceola, there are usually many educators that are not in favor of standard-based grading. Even parents, once they figure out what it entails, no longer want to support it. I know the middle school was trialing this, and it has been nothing short of confusing and hard to follow as a parent who checks their child's grades and progress. There is usually nothing entered as they have to wait for an assessment to be completed, and even when it is hard to share out the progress with the way the system is set. On a side note, please get rid of Schoology. This has been nothing but a nightmare, and I primarily use PowerSchool as it's way user-friendly. One of the reasons we chose to move to the I-35 community 8 years ago was first, it was a small community where we initially and immediately felt welcomed. Second, there was a great school who pushed our kids to succeed and was not passing out participation trophies. I love my kids still say the Pledge of Allegiance and that a teacher will contact me for both positives and hiccups my kids will encounter. With this said, I want to hold on to the fact our school is creating fully rounded kids who are a step closer to being successful adults. Here are my points of why SBG would be a bad road for the I-35 community and more importantly our kids. First, tests can invoke anxiety and fear in people, especially children. Now, if we add on that basically these tests will determine if you pass or fail a course, it is going to cause the aforementioned feelings to increase. And not all students test well due to the pressure, but can show their knowledge in other ways. Take someone who can't show you an English understanding in a multiple choice test, but can write a phenomenal paper showing these skills. Then there's the added pressure for our teachers to now teach to the standard. It steals their creativity in the classroom. I have been lucky to know some amazing educators, many of whom are right here at I-35. Taking their creativity away and their passion in learning will happen with SBG. It has been found that when we teach and test to a standard, our kids are not retaining the information, but rather memorizing it for the test and moving on. I understand this can happen even if not doing SBG, but it is considered, but it is increased in the area. SBG does not always give you a true picture of a student's ability. There are systematic inconsistencies in SBG. You could have a teacher who chooses to test for a standard checking, but teacher B does a project to test a standard. Where is consistency in this? Then comes the issue of the kids getting chance after chance to retake an assessment till they pass. You could have teacher A who hands out a review sheets, and that's it. This is not reteaching. This is having the student memorize a topic, test to pass, and then moving on. Nothing is being retained. Teacher B decides to reteach to students to help. This then takes away from other students in the classroom, as well as the teacher's very valuable time, as they are having to reteach a unit that is possibly 2 previous units behind. This hurts the other students and makes it almost impossible to catch up and actually retain anything. You just doubled the work for our already overworked teachers. And let's be honest, our teachers are already giving more than we know for our children. This is not based on life, as we do not get a million chances in the adult world. As someone who previously worked in law enforcement as a probation officer and is now an educator, I know well life will not give you many chances. Accountability and responsibility will come into play one day. Education should be about seeing the big picture and retaining information, not just what the state of Iowa thinks is important to the standards. SBG is often looked at as 80-20, 80% testing, 20% schoolwork for final grades. Once students know this, they will stop doing the work or very little of it and only focus on the test. Again, this is horrible for kids who do not test well. My niece recently went from having a solid A in math to an F because of one test. She had been turning in assignments and doing well and thought she would do great on the test. However, the day of, anxiety and stress kicked in. She was allowed to retake and only given review sheets and told she could ask questions if needed. To see her fear of possibly missing her track season over this and stress on what the retake held was heart-wrenching. She eventually passed but struggled again in the next chapter because she did not retain anything, only used it to pass. This makes me wonder too, how will this grading affect our eligibility for sports? You could have a student doing well with an A take the test and drop to an F. Now
Ms.
cannot
Buckland,
play.
5 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Williams.
First of all, I want to thank the board for responding about the meeting tonight. We did request that it was moved to a better venue, and we do thank you for that. Thank you for your responses. And tonight, I mean, we are all bringing up the mask tonight. We understood that it wouldn't be on the agenda tonight, but we want it on the agenda. We want an open forum as a community where we can come before you guys and hold your feet to the fire and ask you the questions of why you insist on these masks with our children. As a community, we want to ask those questions, and we want it to be on the agenda of the next meeting because we need a decision before the school year ends this year so we can start to make plans for next year. We were at the meeting, we met with a small group of parents last night. There was probably about 20 parents there, I would say, and we're all in consensus, and many of them are here tonight, plus some. And we all want this question and answer time. We can't wait till August because we need to make plans for our students next year. If you do not provide a confirmation mask, will be optional by next year. You better be prepared for 10 to 20% drop in your enrollment. That could be upwards towards $1 million that the school is going to lose out on. How many teachers are you going to have to fire? Custodians are you going to have to let go because you won't make the proper decision the community wants? Our kids are our main focus, and as parents, it's our responsibility to fight. And the checkbook seems to be the only way we can get through to the board and the administration. And we're willing to take it to that next step. Now, the virtual academy, or virtual learning in the virtual academy, I spoke on that last month and said that the virtual learning was complete garbage. My kids have learned nothing. And it's not just that. The teachers being hindered with the virtual learning and teaching is bringing down the in-person learners too. They're not getting the proper attention that they need in class as the teachers are burdened. And if we did this separate virtual academy, I don't think that's a good resource or use of our resources at this time. I think we need to focus on getting our kids up to speed and caught up from this past year of falling behind. Our kids need to be in person, and they need to be working on good immune system building habits. I mean, they need to be eating things that help their immune system. They need to be around other germs and stuff to build their immune system so they don't get sick, rather than just hiding behind a mask. I guess, I mean, I'm not going to talk the whole 5 minutes. This is the bottom line. Tonight, we're putting the whole administration and board on notice. We are the community, and we are giants in this community, and we care about our kids, and we're willing to do whatever it takes. And if you're not willing to do the things that the community wants, we're going to do everything in our power to start the process to remove every one of you that won't support the community in their decisions. We need an answer before the end of the school year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Heather Jelsma.
Can you hear me? Good evening. I apologize for what I'm going to say. I do not want this to be an adversarial relationship between me and the school. I love this school. I want my kids to be here. But that being said, your policies next year are going to affect 4 of the people I love most. My tax dollars help pay your salary, superintendent. My vote helped get 2 of you elected. I've tried talking to you. All I get is political answers or dismissed. So I don't know what else to do to get you to take me seriously. There is no guidance that requires children to wear masks in school, so stop using it as an excuse. The CDC, public health, all suggest but do not require masks. The Department of Education recommends schools, quote, destigmatize both mask wearing and the choice to not wear a mask, end quote, and does not require masks for school. The choice to mask our school lies with you, the school board, and only you, so take responsibility for your decision. According to the superintendent, the mandate was put in place to protect kids who mask from having to quarantine unfairly. Because if person A is wearing the mask and person B is not, and one tests positive for COVID, both have to quarantine. Under the mandate, when both are masked, only the testee has to quarantine. The problem with this hypothetical scenario is that it assumes that the unmasked child is the carrier of COVID. In seeking fairness for one group of kids in hypothetical, isolated instances, you have punished another group in every single real-life experience throughout this past school year. The harm that has been caused isn't confined just to in-person learning, but includes every family who homeschooled or did virtual learning because of your policies. It includes every teacher who had to enforce your policies when they would rather have been teaching. Instead of destigmatizing people's mask choices, you have discriminated against those who choose not to mask. Last year, you voted unanimously for a mask mandate, supposedly to protect the health and safety of our kids. If you believed in them so strongly, why did your kids participate in full contact sports with no social distancing and no masks? If this is about protecting each other, wasn't that an incredible risk to your families? In a classroom setting, kids are separated at their desks, not exerting a lot of energy and breathing on each other like they are in football, wrestling, or basketball. They're also limited to the same 19 other kids a day, unlike sports where you come in contact with who knows how many kids from all around the state. So not only did you risk your kids' health, but the health and safety of all their classmates and teachers through their potential exposure. I have seen board members also. I've seen Roger at football games, and I've seen Eddie recently at a track meet with no masks or social distancing. And superintendent, you refereed soccer games for little kids without wearing a mask. You got down on eye level, face to face, no social distancing with the same kids who your policies require to wear masks, even on a playground. So let's cut out all this bullshit that this is about our health and safety. This is about you covering your asses at the expense of our kids. If this was in the best interest of our students and staff, why did you wait until the last minute to spring it on us last year? Where were the surveys and discussions? Why wasn't there a mask question on that stupid joke of a survey this year? Stop meddling in what is none of your business and get back to the job we hired you to do. Educate our kids. Let us make the healthcare decisions for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Abigail.
Good evening. My name is Abby. I'm in 4th grade.
Thank you.
I'm in 4th grade. I'm here tonight to ask you to consider changing the rule of wearing masks all the time. I think masks should be optional because masks don't stop the spread of the virus. People in school are testing positive and still being quarantined, even though we still wear masks. The masks are extremely hard to breathe in and uncomfortable, especially when classrooms warm up with the weather like today. Can we make a deal with wearing masks only in the hallways for the 21 days left of school? I'm in sports and I do some other things with my friends outside of school and we don't wear masks. So why should we wear them in school? We have worn them all year and can you give us a break? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amanda Dershad. Nathan Gibson.
Members of the board, thank you. My name is Nathan Gibson. I'm the coach of the I-35 high school trap team. I've got two daughters and a son in this school. First off, y'all have been amazing, so I'm totally rewriting my script here to talk to you guys at a personal level. So I moved to this school district 8 years ago. And I moved to this school district for a reason. I'm born and raised here in Iowa, but at the time I was living in Johnston. And before I get into that story, first off, I want to say, Ms. Stentlinger, thank you for taking the time to talk with me, listen to me, let me express my frustrations. I don't know if Brandy's in here. Brandy, thank you. Mr. Castor, I've talked with all of you. Even Eddie, you and I have had some conversations in the past, so I appreciate it. But I wanted to tell a story about me trying to follow this tree up the train to figure out, the head of this snake on this mask mandate thing. So obviously, I get a call that my daughters were quarantined at some point in time. I asked the question respectfully, where's the policy coming from? Obviously, I talked with you, Ms. Stentlinger, and with Brandy. I get a name from Madison County. I call Sharon. Sharon gives me a name at the Iowa Department of Public Health, who gives me a name, who gives me a name, who gives me a name. And each time, it's stuff flowing downhill. Now, I want to get back to the point of why I moved to this district. I moved to this district for a lot of reasons, but the main reason is because of the values in this community and who we are, okay? I not only wanted my daughters to have an education, I wanted my daughters to learn how to be an American citizen, to learn how to think for herself, to learn how to make decisions for herself, right? And I want her to see those values, not only in me, but the people around her, the people that are teaching her, the people that are influencing her. Now, I get it that you have to follow those policies sometimes, or at least you think you do. And I get that it's scary. There's liability issues. You probably got a lawyer on the board that's advising you. And I get it, but ultimately it's your decision. And you see the support of this community right here on what decision we want you to make. So I ask you to be fearless, to use it as what it is. It's guidance, but it should be one point in your decision making, right? There are several factors that play into this. You don't have to regurgitate just what's being told from you from the top down, okay? We're independent thinkers. This community is different. If I wanted that, I'd move to Des Moines Public School District, okay? I came to this school district for a few things. One, I wanted my daughters to be able to shoot guns and talk to her friends about it and not be criticized, okay? I wanted my daughter to drive my dirty F-250 truck to the parking lot and have all her friends say, that is cool. I also wanted it to fit in the parking lot, okay? But I think most of all, I moved to this community because I wanted my kids to not only learn an education, but learn the values that this community has, the people that elected you and put you into office, that you're representing and emulating that. Teach our kids to think for themselves, not just to regurgitate what somebody else is telling you from up above. Sometimes we need to make the decision that's contrary to the popular narrative because of who we are, because of this community. So that's what I ask for you today. Please factor that in. Don't just regurgitate. Teach our kids to think for themselves, emulate that, and show them that is a value that we have here in our community. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Katie Monroe.
My name is Katie Monroe. My husband Anthony and I have a first grader, a preschooler, and a future roadrunner here in the district. I'm here tonight because Kelsey Ritchie and myself were part of the committee that explored the possibility of a virtual learning academy at Interstate 35. As you know, that's on the agenda tonight for Mrs. Dentlinger to present the recommendation of our committee. But Kelsey and I both wanted to speak tonight in order to reiterate the comments, and I also wanted to share some personal thoughts and insights about how we came to our recommendations about online learning at I-35. So what I want to focus on is a little bit of background about what some of the major concerns around virtual learning were and continue to be for myself and several other committee members as we went into these discussions. So first of all, over the last year plus, we have lost significant classroom education time. Everybody here knows that. Not only did we lose 3 months at the end of 2020 though, we have, between the continued Friday early outs for elementary students, the Fly Fridays and open campus for our middle school and high school students, as well as using PD and snow days as virtual learning days, that has added up to additional weeks of in-person learning time that we have lost this year. We feel it's imperative that next year and beyond, we put our sole focus and priority into getting our students and teachers back to the classroom in a full-time capacity so we can begin to catch up from the disruption to our classroom instruction time. Second, the stress we have put on our teachers this year in order to support virtual learning was more than I think anyone envisioned or desired, and it's not fair to them or the students they're trying to support. Myself and many other committee members made it very clear that any virtual learning option or even the exploration of an online academy should not take another minute of our teachers' time away from providing quality in-person education. Our teachers deserve the time necessary to help our students catch up socially, emotionally, and academically from the last year or more. We aren't questioning that this hasn't always been a priority of our teachers and our administration, even throughout the past year, but we have unfortunately had to distract from that purpose to support remote learning options. We want to make sure that those distractions are temporary and not permanent. And then finally, what I ultimately kept coming back to throughout all of these discussions is that our focus should be on what a lot of people here tonight have said, what Interstate 35 District is known for and why many of us here value the small school experience we are lucky to have. We provide a high quality education with a small class size that allows for teachers to know and understand their individual students, and it's all supported by strong personal relationships among our parents, teachers, administrators, and students. We feel strongly that our priority should be on maintaining this, and many committee members felt that not only is a virtual environment not conducive to those relationships and experiences, but a virtual academy simply does not align with those values. Before I conclude, I do want to reiterate how appreciative my husband and I are of all of the time and effort that our teachers, staff, all of you up there put in this year. I am truly thankful that my student was able to be here in person as much as he was, and I'm grateful for all the work that went into making that happen. But as I said before, we need to be sure that we do not turn temporary changes into permanent solutions that aren't in the best interest of our district and students. I sent an email to all of you prior to the meeting, and I'm just going to reiterate that I ask you to support our committee recommendation that we not pursue the development or exploration of a virtual learning academy or the continued remote learning option at Interstate 35. I also ask that you keep those same concerns I've shared tonight in mind as you discuss other potential changes, specifically those around offering core courses online or continuing this year's schedule adjustments into the coming school year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm assuming it's me. I think I'm last tonight.
One paper left, Kelsey.
Thank you. Like Katie said, my name is Kelsey Ritchie, and my husband and I have a first grader in the school district. Like she also mentioned, I served on the committee this month that discussed the positive and negative attributes of a full-time online learning academy for I-35. Many of the comments I'm going to share with you tonight I've already mentioned to all of you through phone calls and emails, but like Katie, feel that these comments need to be reiterated during tonight's meeting. First and foremost, I'd like to address the fact that there are several in attendance tonight, which is pretty unusual. While I do not know everyone here personally, and many of them do not know me, over the course of the past several weeks, I've become acquainted with many of their concerns and frustrations. And while everyone's opinions and preferences do not perfectly align, and each family's concerns are as unique as the families themselves, common themes and threads bind us together, which brought us here this evening to address the school board. One of those common themes is an overall frustration with the lack of direct communication regarding the decisions that have been made, which have significantly altered the everyday experience at I-35. Furthermore, several parents are also frustrated with the lack of opportunities to be part of these discussions, which offer an opportunity to provide valuable feedback before decisions are made. The other common theme, and the one I believe to be the most important, is the overwhelming support and appreciation for our teachers. We know how hard they worked this year and every year. We see their unyielding dedication for both their in-person and virtual students firsthand, and we know that they are also tired. And so many of our questions, especially regarding online learning options for students at I-35, come from a place of sincere support and appreciation for those teachers who are ultimately responsible for the progress in learning for each child. In an effort to be concise, here are some of my thoughts regarding the committee. I do not support exploring or implementing an online learning academy at I-35 because throughout the course of our committee discussions, a need or value for such a program was not adequately demonstrated. Additionally, questions regarding the investment, continued cost, potential return, resource and teacher requirements, and plans for operations still remain unanswered. I do not support offering high school core classes in an online format because having spent nearly 10 years working in higher education admissions, I believe students are best served and most prepared for college and all post-secondary opportunities by not only learning the content, but by learning how to directly and actively engage with peers face-to-face and not behind a computer screen. That being said, that is only my opinion. I would like to see our high school educators, the folks that develop and teach this core content every day, to be involved in this discussion and ultimately make the decision they feel is best. I also do not support continuing Fly Fridays because many of the parents I have spoken to verbalize that these days lack the rigor and expectations that are present during traditional in-person days. Additionally, several teachers that I have spoken to have expressed that these days fall overwhelmingly short when it comes to progress and learning that typically takes place in person. And finally, I do not support open campus, which begins secondary scheduling at 9 a.m. because removing first period results in fewer course selections, less opportunities for electives, and less opportunities for students to take specialized courses that either provide them an opportunity to hone specific skills or become immersed in something that they are passionate about. For example, foreign language, music, foods, VOTEC, or advanced placement courses. The other side of this argument is that our teachers need this time for collaboration and intervention. Two other valuable and necessary concerns. My challenge to the school district is to find a solution to achieve both of these items, which do not result in removing students from the classroom. As we move forward with tonight's meeting, I ask you to keep the following things in mind. The list of 40-some students that are currently remote learning do not exhibit the need or definite interest for an online learning academy. And I feel that the survey to teachers left out one very important question, and that is if they truly believe that continuing online learning options is in the best interest for students at I-35. Lastly, I've had parents thank me recently for communicating and organizing updates regarding our committee discussions, and I'd like everyone here to know that I learned how to ask questions sitting in Mrs. Treef's English classroom. I learned how to speak publicly in Mr. Douglas's speech classroom, and I learned the importance and the value of civic engagement in Mr. Busby's classroom. And I'd like to ensure that every student at I-35 has the opportunity to achieve these same experiences. Thanks.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the open forum. I appreciate everybody who signed up to speak, and I appreciate everybody's comments. Did we get a student representative report?
I did not. I don't think Steve did either, so. No, not this month.
All right. That'll move us to the principal reports.
I'll go ahead and go first.
Mr. Tessa is behind you up above. So.
Can you hear me up here? Things are going pretty good at the elementary. Just wrapped up ISASP testing last week with makeups and everything, and that went really smoothly. So we always have our fingers crossed during that process that everything goes smoothly, and look forward to seeing those results. I know a lot of teachers are excited to see those come back in. Continuing to do some different things to try to feel a sense of normalcy. We got some field trips scheduled coming up here in May. The zoo, Living History Farms, taking advantage of the Civic Center's remote shows that they're doing. We have several that are booked. They come in here, they watch the show on the auditorium. I'm glad that our screen is fixed again, so we get to use the big screen rather than the little one, so that's been nice. Had a new experience today with the fire drill where we blocked a door just to see how the kids reacted, and we were pretty impressed that they didn't even miss a beat. They saw that the door said blocked by fire. They turned and they went to the next nearest exit. So that was the first time we had done that, and that went pretty well. So we were pretty tickled by that. Third grade's getting ready to kick off their newspaper project. That's always a big excitement in the building. I think that's about it, unless you have any questions.
So, Jeff, does all the classes have field trips planned?
A couple of them did them in the fall, so some of them are already done. I know we had one class that went to Living History Farms. Even if they're, the venue they normally go to at the grade level is closed, I know there's some of them that they're not taking big school groups. They have found different things to do, so every class will have some sort of off-site field trip at some point, even if it is just a picnic in a park. But for the most part, they've all found a venue that will take a class.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Tessa? No. Mr. Castor?
April's a busy month can everybody hear me okay? April's a busy month for the secondary, but it's kind of the beginning of the end for us as far as the school year, so I'm happy again that we can be here in person for that this year. But prom was held on April 10th. Baccalaureate comes up Wednesday night, this coming Wednesday the 28th at 7 p.m. here in the auditorium for our students. We've got lots of spring activities going on, boys, girls track, boys and girls golf. FFA just recently participated in their state competition, and we had some really good results from that competition as well. It's always fun to see kids compete on the state level. We did have a state champion out of that group, and so it's nice to see kids out and about and participating right now in a lot of different things. ISASP testing for us as well was the week of the week of April 12th. Makeups were the following week, and we have a few to finalize here this week, but we're close to being done with that. We continue to work on our standards-based grading handbook. I plan to have a draft to the coaches for feedback tomorrow. The goal is to get that in the staff's hands by Monday so that we can get that unpacked and they can provide feedback for what that looks like for the end of May's professional development. So we have a date, I don't know the date off the top of my head. The day after kids are gone, we have a PD for staff. So the goal would be to work with them on feedback from that handbook. So that's the secondary report.
Any questions for Mr. Castor?
So Steve, when, with the standard-based grading, when will there be information out to the public about it?
Sure. The plan is to get it in the hands of the staff first, to go through that PD at the end of May, and as soon as we get that taken care of, we will have multiple dates over the summer to do an open house with, or a public, chance to become a little more versed in what that looks like through June and July, and then obviously into next fall. So the goal is to get probably 3 dates over the months of June, July, and August for people to come in and
So the standard-based grading is for the entire school district, so from kindergarten all the way up to 12th?
Well, the elementary that is their current practice now, is what their report card looks like is standards based, and so we would apply that to grades 5 through 12. The English department our pilot is operating right now, and so they're providing us a ton of feedback for what that could and should look like for us.
So as a parent, there will be thorough discussion for parents to understand how it converts.
Yep.
From whether it's 1 through 4 to
Yep.
A through F, and then current grade points.
So at the last PD with staff, we had them write down questions that they had on note cards, and so I've been taking that feedback and making sure I can answer those questions that were provided on the cards within the handbook, and that will be shared out to staff as well. But yes, how it translates to GPA, what it looks like on a report card, that'll all be present. It is present in the draft that I'll send out to staff the end of the week.
Are there a lot of schools around here that's already doing it?
There are a number of schools around. We've got Norwalk is doing it. Van Meter, just conference schools that I've worked with. Woodward Granger, I mean, they have adopted, all within some capacity, but I would say the conference school that's immersed the most would be Van Meter.
Is there feedback from them? Have you reached out to find out how it's worked for them?
Not directly. Conference principals meet on I'll call it an irregular basis, but the ones that I'm in touch with the most would be Woodward Granger and Van Meter, and so we've bounced ideas back and forth. They've got their approach to things. I have bounced stuff off of former colleagues of mine from Norwalk to see how things are working for them. They've been in this practice now, I think for 3 years or 4 years, I don't remember exactly, but they've been a good sounding board as well.
Thank you.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about graduation planning, what you have going on, who's all involved in that?
Yeah. Graduation planning, so we met with the seniors probably 3 weeks ago now. They filled out a survey as well as I communicated that out to parents. They completed their survey and selected that they want to hold graduation in the gymnasium, and so we will have graduation on that Sunday, that scheduled Sunday in the gymnasium at 2 p.m. And then they also selected to continue the tradition of the town parade after the graduation is completed. So we will do that, as well as we plan to do, they liked the portrait of the senior with their diploma and their cap and gown that Mrs. Haynes took, and so we will continue with that as well. Slightly different size and format, but it will be the same kind of process. So those graduation is in person as scheduled.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castor. Superintendent report.
So we have a couple of things just to make you aware of. The school district was notified probably 3 or 4 weeks ago about kind of a class action lawsuit for the experiences that we're dealing with vaping. That hasn't been a huge concern, I don't think, this year, but last year we dealt with a significant number of vaping instances. And so we wanted to make you aware of this. We are working to see if this is something that would benefit the district to become a part of. It's been sent to us by the school business officers group, and also we've been made aware of it by a couple of our other advocates. And so it's not a cost to the district. It's if the lawsuit happens, obviously the lawyers that are kind of making this class action would get a portion of it, but then the district would get a portion to use for things like training, education for kids, all of those things that we do it would just help supplement that. So just wanted to make you aware of it. We are in the process of digging into it a little bit more, but it has been in the community or in the public, so we wanted to make sure that you knew what we were working on with that. We also, the second item I have on there is our custodial contract hours. We are short-staffed in our custodial department. I think we've been talking about this for several months, and so we have contracted with an outside agency that has provided services for our high school, and now we are also going to have to contract with outside agencies for our elementary. This is, and I've visited with the Labor Management Committee. We've brainstormed, we've kind of tried to figure out how to, to get people in the district applying, what it is, and it's a real challenge right now. I think the state of Iowa has about a 3% unemployment rate, which is really, really low. So we're up against a couple of challenges. This is not something, as we talked about the last time, that is permanent. As soon as we get people hired that have kind of worked through the process of the training of whatever that area of the building is, our discussion is to do some deep cleaning and then move our hired help out, meaning our janitorial services that we're using currently. We have such a great facility. We don't want to do any harm by not being proactive and making sure we support kind of the things teachers are doing in the classroom, keeping those environments clean, especially with all the conversations around sanitation this year. So that is something that we've worked through. Mr. Gray is here and he can answer questions, I think, when he talks about his building report, but I just wanted to make you aware that we are adding that because we've lost 2 custodians. And one went to a job that was kind of like the ideal job, and so you can't fault that. You want them to move on and to have success. So we will continue to work on that. C, or the third option, or the third thing, is similar to that. We on May 5th we're going to have a job fair. We're going to have all of our directors here. We're going to have information about what our salaries are, what our benefits are, just to get information out to public. I think we get a lot of times where we'll talk to people in the community and they'll say, oh, I didn't even know that was a possibility. If you're a parent that wants to stay home or have the same hours that your kids do, we have positions that you could do and have that flexibility. So we just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to get people here, to see what we do, to see our great facility and talk through what's available. So we're continuing to kind of brainstorm how we get people here and what we do, but it's ongoing. So that'll be May 5th. If anybody is interested in coming, or if you know anybody that's interested, we'd sure love to have you here on May 5th.
Hey Sharon, what type of positions are you talking about there at the fair? Can you kind of expand
Sure,
on that
we
a little
have,
bit?
oh yeah, really any.
Okay.
We have custodian positions. We have a maintenance position that is open. That is some shared work with Southeast Warren. We have bus drivers, people who either want to ride routes or people who maybe want to do activity trips for our kids. Some of those are during the day. A lot of those are at nights for sporting events and things like that, club activities. We have cooks, so those are positions that start when school starts typically and are done by 2. So we have cook positions open. What am I missing? Custodial, transportation, associates. Don't know how I missed that. But people who work with our kiddos, sometimes they have duties during the day, maybe a recess duty or a lunch duty. Sometimes they work with a special needs student. So associates, and they can help with things like summer school. So there's a lot of opportunity. So we just want to make people aware, get people in here. I think we do some great things here, and we want to make sure everybody's aware of it. And if they want to be a part of that, we'd love to talk to them about it.
What time is that then?
That'll be 5:30 to 7.
Okay.
And I think one of the challenges we've had, or that we've heard from some of our public, is all jobs now are posted through what they call Teach Iowa. And one of the challenges is navigating that. So we were going to have computers here. We were going to walk people through it. We were going to, give out tutorials about just step by step so that it's not as daunting. I think that that's one of the things that's overwhelming. We don't want to turn people off before they even come visit with us just because the process is hard. But that's something that we're working through. And Lori Jordan and Jen Boffman are really kind of taking the lead on that and creating some handouts that we can give to people, things that we can post around the community. So we'll keep working on that. But it's May 5th from 5:30 to 7. So if anybody has an interest, we'd love to have you here. The last thing that we did, about 2 weeks ago, we did a tabletop activity on safety. So we have a safety committee that meets and really kind of talks about issues that could happen. How do we plan for them? How do we prepare? And so this one was based on if we had an outdoor event, let's say a middle school track meet, and we had a tornado just kind of come up. What would we do? How would we move people? How would we communicate? And so as we went through the process, there were several steps. So first, we're notified that a tornado, the sirens are going off, right? Mr. Smith wanted to get those last 2 events in, but just, it didn't work. Then the next thing happens. We lose power, or we lose communication, or somebody has a medical issue on the track while this is happening. So we're just putting in scenarios of what are we going to do? How are we going to communicate? So we had representatives from all 3 fire departments there. We had the sheriff's office there, and we had the emergency management coordinator there. And I think one of the biggest benefits of that is they know our area. They know our building, and they also know they have a skill set that a lot of us as teachers don't have. And so by having those community members come in, it's really a benefit just to even have the conversation with them that, okay, this is how we're thinking about it. What do you see? And what would you give us as recommendations? And I think that's one of the benefits of that process is that we have not just our voices and what we think makes sense because we're in education, we're in this building, but the people who do this for a living, the people who do this and are trained professionally giving us feedback on that. So we did that about 2 weeks ago and I think came away with some really good ideas. So that's what I have unless you have questions.
No questions for Mrs. Bentley?
For me.
Okay. We will move on to our consent agenda items. We're going to discuss or approve the consent items. This requires a motion and a second and a vote to approve the consent agenda items. We all should have received the past meeting minutes. The monthly bills and financial statements have been distributed. We got open enrollment information, and then we have a number of hires and resignations, and I'll run through those real quick. Jacob Hedinger resigns as pre-K through 6 counselor. Keegan Smith resigns as special education director and athletic director. Becky Porter resigns from EL special ed teacher, middle school reading interventionist. Bill Bubany resigns from evening custodian position. Ethan Adair resigns from evening custodian position. Jordan Wisecup hired as middle school assistant head baseball. Haley Young Druvenga hired as a 5 through 8 intervention. Bailey Balsine hired as a middle school special education teacher. Tanya Donahue hired as an 8th grade English teacher. Brandy Moa Lamp internally transferred to a 7th grade English teacher. Brayton Weber hired as activities special education director. And Brianna Lowry resigns as varsity girls volleyball coach. We also had the Aea Purchasing Agreement, the driver's education contract, and the Coke contract in there. Is there any questions or comments on any of the above items?
I'd just like to ask in general on the hires and resignations, are we keeping up? Is there any hard to fill positions that we still have open that you're concerned about for next school year?
I'll let our principals who are hiring those positions speak to that, Jeff and Steve.
I couldn't hear what he said, so I wasn't sure. We did interview counselor today for K6. I don't know if he mentioned that or not. So hopefully we'll have that filled this week. Otherwise, that's all I've got open on my end right now.
I don't know that there were many, to kind of talk more in a broader sense, I don't know that there were many that we didn't have multiple applicants and really solid applicants for. We did see a little bit of that because we had 2 English jobs open in the middle school. That gets to be a little tricky. Those were both transfers internally, but to different positions, not leaving the district. So I think that that's a challenge. If you look at the State of Iowa website, almost any position, with the exception of elementary, is what they deem hard to fill, which I think is just kind of the state of education across the country right now. So I would say that I'm very excited about the hires we have. I think we're bringing a lot of really talented people on board, so that's encouraging. And then when we do post a job, even sometimes a late position, we're seeing some quality applicants come in still. So.
Sharon, I think for the benefit of the public, maybe just touch on what these agreements and contracts that we're approving.
Yeah, the Aea Purchasing Agreement, we partner with the Aea. They are the Area Education Association, and they just get discount prices because they buy in bulk. So we buy our paper from them. We can also buy some food products from them. So this is an agreement we do every year just to get some things at discounted prices. So that's the Aea Purchasing Agreement. Our Street Smart is our driver's ed, and I did contact the state because we do need to find out if there are other vendors for this, but they told us that there really isn't another option close to us to make it feasible. So this is, I mean, the contract I think increased by, do you remember the exact amount?
You went to 380.
Yeah, I think it was at 360. Or so
it's been quite a while since they've adjusted the price. So.
And it's a 3-year contract, so our students will get into this and be a part of the Street Smart program if they choose. So that's the driver's education contract. And then the Coke contract is for our concessions. We do that contract every 5 years. We did contact Pepsi and did not hear from them, so Mr. Smith worked with Coke and came up with the contract. I think it does increase from the last time, which was 5 years ago. So
have we always gone with Coke?
Yes.
I was gonna say I don't know. I just know this one and the last one. Don't know before that. So those are those contracts. I mean, we put them on there because we want people to be aware, but they're also kind of routine things that we want to make sure we're offering those things for kids and also our district to save money. So.
Is there any other questions? Not hearing any, we would need a motion and a second to take action on the consent agenda items.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda items.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda items. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? All right. That takes us to our items for discussion. Presentation of the return to learn data. Can I get a 2-second break? I think I have a 8-year-old out there that I just need to touch base with. So.
Yep.
Jeff, is it projected?
I don't have a hair issue.
Well, they can see it right there. It's just so you can see what's up there at the same time that they can. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, presentation of return to learn data.
Okay, so the administrative team wanted to get some feedback on return to learn. Just from the standpoint of, as we look at next year in planning, what do we want to pay attention to? What feedback do we get from kind of all of our stakeholders, our students, our teachers, our staff, and staff, our support staff is who we're talking about. So cooks, bus drivers, janitors, because everybody's been impacted this year. And then from our parents or our community. So the surveys went out in March of 2021. The respondents, we had 268 parent response, average about 470 households in any given year. So we had a pretty high response rate. Typically, they'll tell you that a response rate of between 5 and 30% is average, and we were above 50. So that, I think, was good. I think people want to tell us ugly, and we appreciate that. Teachers, we had a 55 out of 63 respond. Students, we only offered it for students 5 through 12th grade. We did not offer it younger than that. And then we also just wanted it to kind of look at the return to learn plan. That's the document that we started. Schedule, some of the health guidance and those things. So that's the background for that. The health and safety was a question just simply, did the public, did their staff, did our students think that I-35 took the appropriate health and safety precautions effectively? And this graph, and I appreciate I had feedback from the public, so I'm going to talk through two different graphs here. This graph was yes in blue, and yes and too much, yes or too much in red. And it came to my attention that that's why if you look at the newest version online, which went up last Thursday, it looks like this. And so the idea was to differentiate between yes and too much. So of the respondents, 75% said based on precautions that we took, whether that was whether that was having masks on, whether that was doing extra cleaning, whether that was having kids sit in pods at lunch, all of those things. And it's a very broad question, and I completely understand that. But that's the response rate we had. We had staff, the people who work in those areas, bus drivers, cooks, custodians, thought we had done the appropriate health and safety precautions. Now, I think as several people in the audience have pointed out, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning, what people, and I think that, and we understand that, we recognize that. So the one thing that we did do is we had asked for feedback based on that. So what are the things that we either need to do different? What do we need to do? What do we need to keep in mind? What went well, what didn't? And so when you add these up, you don't get 100% because we had some people pick other and then give us feedback. So between 4 and 5%, or 4 and 5 on each, 4 or 5% on each question could go either way, because we had eliminate masks, or I appreciate my kids being in school. You did enough, things like that. So there's a variance, and that's why those don't add up to exactly 100. So some of the biggest themes and comments was consider eliminating the mask mandate, and I think our community tonight spoke to that for lots of different reasons. Make it parent choice. Continue to encourage students to stay home when sick. We still work on this, but I think that's a shift in our whole culture. I don't know that that's something that we've ever really done. We just go to school, we go to work. So that shift, I think, is happening, but there's still, I think, that stuff we have to do. The challenge we have, and I think everybody who has kids that has allergies, can relate, is that there are times when a student comes to school and we know it's allergies, and so I think the challenge we have is that the way that this, the pandemic has kind of impacted our health system and how people go to the doctor has somewhat changed. So the way that it's currently set up, if you go to the doctor and find out that you have COVID, then you isolate, you do your thing, and then for 90 days, you're kind of okay. Well, if you know your kid is sick or your student is sick, you suspect they might have COVID, but you don't go to the doctor, you still fall in all those guidelines that were given time and time again. And so that's where I think Brandy has done a good job to try and work with parents to really understand what it is, if it's a known instance of health conditions that we've dealt with or that student has had. But that's a really tough ask. And so I think that's one of the challenges with that staying at home when sick, is that it's not as easy as it looks, nor is it always black and white. So continue to increase some of those other guidelines is one of the recommendations, the hand washing, covering coughs, that kind of thing. Consistent enforcement of policies and guidelines from all staff. I think that's one of the challenges that we've seen, and I understand that's one of the frustrations. Considering loosening some of those health guidelines and safety measures as we get more information, get more details. Those are all common themes that came out of that section or that question of the survey. Communication, this one was enough, too much, not enough. I think that, we've increased our accessibility to our online, so we have now an Instagram, I think we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have all of those avenues, but we've also really tried to do more with getting things out to parents through email and making sure that as we get more information and we update things that they get that information as well. Some of the themes from that, 26% of our parents are currently using the app, and that's kind of that new service, which a quarter of them, that's, I think, speaks well of that need. Some parents still like traditional forms of communication, direct mail. They don't necessarily want anything on social media. So we've been sending out letters as we have kind of, I would say, summaries of things that we're working on. We're sending those out hard copy as well. Parents and teachers want reminders for updates, calendar changes, things like that. Teachers and staff prefer staff meetings as a form of communication. I think that's so that questions can be asked and answered kind of in a timely manner, and everyone hears the same thing. Everybody wants information in a timely manner. It is suggested that information is still communicated in multiple formats, so we continue to still send things at home or direct mail. We still do some, or we still also include that through email, and we also do our social media. So I think people like those different options. It is important to note that some of the information being asked for or being asked to communicate is not information that we can share. There was a couple of comments where people said, we want to know who it is so that and we just can't share that. So it's privacy, it's what we've had in place the whole time. But I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out because there were a few people who said, I'd like more detailed information to know who was either diagnosed or tested positive. So I just wanted to put that in just to clarify that. And then communicate some of the why. I think last week I tried to focus in on that for some of the things we were talking about tonight and give extra feedback and information. So That was the feedback from the communication. The remote learning days, professional development and snow days, I think it's pretty safe to say that as a system, we value kids being here, and I think that our calendar, we approved the calendar for next year, last year, and that's based on hours, and I think we're at 1147 for hours, so we're well over the minimum number that the state requires. And I don't anticipate that changing. I mean, we've talked about those Fridays and not having a need for that because we're not doing remote learning, and we've talked that we're not doing that the same way that we did it this year. If we're doing it at all, which I think we have to have a conversation. If somebody has to be gone for quarantine, what does that look like? But that's a conversation we started with teachers. And the snow days, I think that's a challenge because as we hear, and I think it makes sense, if you have, if we get a snowstorm that's, circulating, that might come after students have left. They might not have a computer at home. So the way that our schedule is set up and the way we've done it the last 3 years prior to this one was just that we would use days, and if we had so many snow days that we had to make some up at the end, we would. And I think that's the consensus of what we need to do going forward. So I told the administrative team that we're not recommending either of these be remote days, unless we're in an anomaly. When I first came to Iowa in the early 2000s, we had 11 snow days. If that's the case, we might have to rethink that, but I hope it's not that way, but you never know. So those are the feedback, the themes. The state has to decide if they're going to allow up to 5 days for remote learning, but I think the consensus is that we're not going to recommend that. We do anticipate the calendar being based on hours next year, just like it should have been, could have been this year, but because of COVID wasn't. And then the days and the hours off.
Just remind me, is that 1,080 hours?
Yes, 1,080. Okay. Yep. And our calendar for next year is 1147.
Okay.
Yep. I do think that there was, some of the comments were if we do use snow days for remote learning days, we need to pay attention to the suggestions from the remote learning feedback. And I think that goes without saying, but it is one of the themes that we saw. And then what would we do for our support staff to make hours if we did use those days as remote days? So those were some of the questions that we had. Open campus, kind of an 8-period day with open campus. This just applies through grades 5 through 12. The yes are in blue. Surprisingly, our students like that option. I don't know that really surprises anyone. Not starting until 9 o'clock, but having study hall that first period that's optional. I do think we had over 50% of our parents that like that choice. So if you want your student to be here, they can be. They'd be in a supervised study hall. So I think that parent choice is important. So I think that's why we had that as kind of the majority for the parents. I think we all know why, probably students. And then teachers, I think the making it a choice between first period or 8th period, we do have events that happen at the end of the day. In the past, we've tried to put our middle school study hall at the end of the day, so it's kind of the same schedule we have. It's just flipped. So there's just conversations around what can that look like, so we can try and get kids the options here, but still get our teachers the collaboration time, which I think Kelsey talked about in her comments. So things we're working on. The collaboration, I know she did mention, consider moving it to the end of the day primarily so that students who are participating in sports aren't missing core classes, and then just make sure students have access to 8 periods in a day. Fly Fridays, that is new. There's a lot of things about that I think have potential, but a lot of things about that I don't think are where we want them to be if we consider that beyond this year. I do know that Mr. Castor is working with his leadership teams, Mrs. Dutchery is working with her leadership teams on what that looks like. And last I heard, the intent is to have kids here the whole day. Do you guys have any more information about that, just as I'm... Okay. After the meeting, okay. So I think that the consensus is we want kids in the building on Fridays. We did talk about maybe doing a stair step, and that's, I think, some of the feedback from parents. Maybe think about doing something half a day, a couple of times a month, so that kids can maybe get job shadowing experiences where they're not missing core classes, or get to internship type experiences. So I think there's some value in that, so we'll continue to work on that. We did have several teachers indicate they appreciated the individual time to pull students in for additional supports. I think if you look at our middle school DNF list, it really is showing that that's been a value add for our middle school students, but I think the question becomes at the expense of what else. So that's where the challenge is. We know that's a valuable time, just don't know if it makes sense to continue to do it then.
So Sharon, before we move past Fly Fridays, we're all, on the survey was only talking about grades 9 through 12. Grades 5 through 8, you're already considering not having Fly Fridays, correct?
Correct.
So that would be a normal 8-period day.
Correct.
Just like Monday through Thursday, correct?
That's my understanding, yes. Okay. And the building teams are developing that, but that's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Virtual Academy, this is one of the questions that we asked, and really was just, should we have virtual learning as an option? And yes and maybe. Not a huge percentage, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're going to make the recommendation we are. I'm going to always try and advocate to meet the needs of every kid, and so if we even have 5, I'm going to still kind of have that discussion, because I think it's what we need to do. Not that I think it needs to happen now, but I do think that my job is to make sure we're at least talking about it and considering it whenever we have a possibility for a program that's going to serve kids. So that information came from our parents and our students. I was a little surprised at the number of maybes from our students. I'm not sure if we need to dig into that one more, but we had over 40% of our students say maybe. So I don't know if that's because they didn't feel like they had success with the way we did it this year and they want more experience with it, but it just tells us that there's at least some idea that kids might want to consider a different option, whether that's now or in the future.
Sharon, is there any way to judge the yeses? What percentage? So it's 10% of the respondents for the parents, but do you get a sense for how many would like to go remote or choose that option?
Say that one more time for me.
Yeah, so at work we're having the same thing, right? We're trying to encourage people back to work. A certain amount of people say, I'm not coming back. I'm looking for a different job, whatever. And so they're just not going to come back. And so what percent, like is 10% of the parents is 470, so it'd be 26 or 27 parents said yes?
No, because not 470 responded. We only had 268 respond.
Right, so 10% of 268 is 27 or 26.
Right, but I think the challenge is, and that question I think as our community said tonight, is based on what we do with masks. You know, if we have several of our kids that are doing remote learning now, they might be choosing that for health or safety reasons, because they don't want their student to wear a mask in school for whatever reason. Yeah. I don't know what that number would be if we make masks optional. Would we have some of the people who are okay with it now change? Probably, but I don't know what that number would be. Yeah. I think when we talk about it though, the number of students that have filled out open enrollment papers before March 1st to open enroll into an academy is 5, an online academy. Okay. So that number is very small. Yeah. And I think some of those kids are even back with us. So I don't know that they're even going to use that open enrollment option, but they've at least filled out the paperwork.
It's a free option for them.
Yes. So I think that's why I don't like the idea of trying to gauge based on what people put on this survey, but I think this at least had us have the conversation, which is what I think the intent was. So we don't have specific numbers other than the 5. We do have, I think, one student currently, I saw Angela in the audience, that currently is in a virtual academy somewhere. And then the 5 that also filled out paperwork, but we're not sure if they're going. Is that where we are? Okay. So. Yeah, so this was just, it was a little different on each one. So that was why I just put the topic, and it was just simply, do you want more information, or do you want us to consider a virtual academy, or something to that effect? So, and then this I put on, and I did put the reminder up there. These comments are based on the remote learning option for this year, and as we talked at the virtual learning committee, the group was kind of digging into this. We had to differentiate between what we did this year for lots of reasons and what we would do if we did an actual virtual academy, because they would not be at all the same thing. They couldn't be. We can't, we've talked, I told the teachers back in March, there's no way we can continue to do what we did. We appreciate all that you did, and we all know why we did it in that return to learn plan, because we didn't know who was going to have to quarantine. We didn't know if we were going to be shut down for a couple of weeks at a time. We just didn't have those answers as the school year started. And so it served us this year. I would say there are things that worked well. I would say there are things that didn't work well. And this feedback, I think, was based on the remote learning option that we have currently. So I think that that's important to know, because that's not really what we talked about. I didn't want to dig into too much of the weeds of what virtual learning would look like for the committee, because that really wasn't the intent. It was just to find out if we even had interest in doing it. So this is feedback for what we did this year, and I think it's just important to note that. And I think these themes are some of the reasons why we came up with what we would say our expectations are for future, which I think is valuable. Okay, so that's just an overview of that survey. Again, it was just to get us an idea of that return to learn plan. All of those topics were things that we had put in place this year to deal with COVID, and we just wanted to get an idea of what all the groups thought of them, or what they liked, what they didn't like. So,
is there any questions for Sharon on the return to learn data?
So what's the next step now? I mean, are you waiting to hear from us as to our thought process on what we'd like to see for the next school year, for you to provide a recommendation, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I've had lots of conversations with public the last couple of weeks, and I think that there's some real valid questions that are being brought up. I think we have to have the conversation around, to what end? Like when are we saying that this is where we want to be? And we've talked all along. When we talked in October and November, and we were seeing several staff members out because they had tested positive. And we started to see an increase in our students, but not a huge increase like we had seen across the county. We talked about 2 reasons why we would do the mask mandate and actually enforce it at a higher degree. And one of those was to keep our staff here, because we didn't have subs. We can't, if we had 5 bus drivers gone, there's no way we could hold school. So that was that was one of the primary reasons. The other reason was because of the guidance we have on quarantining. Now, I've explained it a couple of times, and I just think it needs to be said again. We, as a school district, don't quarantine kids. We work on behalf of public health. And so public health can mandate if we're going to quarantine kids. And lots of counties have done that. To my knowledge, Madison County has not mandated in a legal sense, but their encouragement or their guidance is that you quarantine students who have come into close contact. Same thing with Iowa Department of Public Health. So based on conversations that we had with staff or with community members over the last couple of days, I just wanted to see where we were. Like, where are we even going? Because I think those are real valid. And we've talked with public health, I would say every week for the last 6 weeks since the mask mandate had been lifted from the governor. And just trying to get an idea so that we can make informed decisions and informed recommendations. And when I talked to Mr. Mask today, he came into my office and I was talking to the director of Iowa Department of Public Health. And I just said, it's very difficult if there's not consistency, but what are we as a district supposed to do when we're told that to keep our kids safe, that this is what you're recommending, yet it's not consistent from one district to another, and how do we navigate that? And I think that's really what the board is asking us to do, is navigate that, which rightfully so. So I think the question becomes, if we still have to do the quarantine as per public health under the same guidelines, we talked that one of the reasons why we needed to put masks in place is because, and I know it sounds crazy, but if Ted and I are both in the room and we're sitting this close and he doesn't have his mask on and I do, if he tests positive, I still have to quarantine. And we had a student this last fall that had been quarantined 3 times, 6 weeks of education that she had to do remotely even though she wore her mask all the time. And that's where I think the challenge is how do we give kids that choice, parents that choice, and still allow other parents the choice to say, no, I want my kid to have a mask on, and I don't want them to have to go home as a result. So I think that's where the challenge is. So we've talked about, okay, if we want to do both, how do we do that? How do we create an environment where we can have kids that choose to wear a mask, not have to quarantine, and kids that choose not to wear a mask, if they do get sick or if something happens, then they just stay home. And so that's where our conversations are right now. And I've talked with public health about those. So I don't know that they're going to change guidance unless what she talked about today, an event happens. And what they mean by event, and I'm learning this as we go, I'm not a public health official, but what they mean by an event is if something significant happens. So let's say that there's a huge outbreak of a different strand of COVID. And so that's what they call an event. So they might increase the guidelines. Or if you have an event like people get vaccinated, anybody who wants to be vaccinated can be vaccinated. If that's the event, then they might decrease guidelines. But we don't know when that's going to happen. What we talked about today with public health, the challenge is our adults have had access to, so they could choose whether or not they get the vaccine. Personal choice, fine. But now they can deal with whatever the result of that is. But our students haven't. And I think there's a lot of fear that the state or the federal government is going to mandate that kids get vaccinated. And I'd like to think that's not going to happen, but I don't know. You have to get vaccinated to come to school for certain things right now. And I don't know how they make that choice. I don't know how that happens. But I think what they're saying is we're going to have a hard time lifting those quarantine guidelines unless an event happens, which means they have the choice, whether they choose to do it or not, completely up to families. But if they have that choice, then they're saying that's an event. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Talk is that they're looking at it in May so that over the summer, guidelines might change. But I think that's where we kind of have a challenge is if we're told that we have to quarantine from public health based on health and safety and keeping kids in school, that becomes really challenging if we're not given different guidance based on new information. So
how do...
It's a long answer, I know.
I think in the register they said 84% of high schools require a mask, right? That was, I think, the stat in the register yesterday. I don't know if it's accurate or not. How do they do it? Like, how do the schools that have already taken that measure, the 16%, how do they determine, who to quarantine? Do they just send everybody home if there's a confirmed COVID? Or is it...
Yeah, well, and I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to isolate that even more. So that's why when we talk about lunch and we talk about kids being in groups and they take their masks off when they're in the group of 4 instead of when they're in the big line, only those 4 are impacted because they're having lunch without a mask on for longer than 15 minutes. So that's why we do those smaller groups at lunch. So we don't have to quarantine 6 or 8 kids. We ask kids not to jump tables from day to day because we want to, I mean, and typically they sit with their friends, but we want to make sure that as we work through this, we're trying to keep as many people here as possible. And so by putting in some of those structures, the intent is to limit that. Now, we did get guidance last week as we were working through some close contact information that says if you don't know at 100% that we were in close contact for more than 15 minutes, I think I'm losing my voice. If we don't know, then we're not supposed to quarantine. And that's the approach that we've taken. Now, that's not what they told us previously. And so we had to verify, because we want to make sure we're doing right by people based on our guidance. And so the only people typically that we're quarantining now are people that we're eating lunch with. Or if there's a really significant indication that they were in close contact for more than 15 minutes without being masked properly. So those are things that have evolved, I think, as this has gone on, but it's still not always clear why other districts do what they do. I think their boards have decided, you know, we're gonna make sure we inform parents. We're gonna make sure parents keep kids home when they're sick, and if everybody agrees to that, they might be lifting them. I can't speak to that. I'm not.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mrs. Dentlinger on the return to learn data?
So are we going to discuss about, I guess, our thoughts on the mask? Or, I mean, that's why everyone's here. They all want to know our thoughts. I feel like we've come to the point where we've evolved. And
because you can't add to the agenda, because people who aren't here don't have the ability to come in and voice their opinion. So you can't add to the agenda. But I think...
I get it, but I just would like some discussion about it
Oh,
among
yeah,
us.
I'm not arguing
I'm
that.
not saying we're voting on it. I'm just saying we're having discussion about it so that the public can hear our thoughts on it.
Go ahead.
I feel like we've evolved in this area. I mean, we're in a rural district. We can't treat ourselves like we are in Des Moines or in a very in a big city. I mean, I feel like we've evolved. The big concern in the beginning was for our teachers and our staff to make sure that they are vaccinated because that was the higher risk. So we vaccinated them, and now with the vaccinations available from 16-year-olds on up, that's the choice of parents and families if they choose to do that. And I think as spring and summer begins, everyone's outside more so. And I just feel like with COVID in our area, because I'm thinking for just our location. I don't care what everyone else is doing. I'm just thinking for our location that it's best to move towards no mask. I would even prefer to no mask in May. I was saying that I would even prefer to move to no mask in May because as the school building is really hot, we don't have the whole area air conditioned. I think it makes sense to not leave that as an option for the families and the kids and the staff to decide if they want to wear a mask. That is my opinion.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like it's a choice that everyone can make.
I didn't know if that was included, if your ruling would include the ruling for the before and after daycare. Because I know that's kind of under you guys, but kind of separate. I know, I'm kind of hearing on that. But I didn't know if that was including up or that, yeah.
I think that would be a matter of inclusion because it's the daycare is a part of the school and managed by the school.
Can we? If they, specifically about masks? No, no. Right, about 56%, yeah.
So the data that was up there isn't even close to being accurate. Apparently it came in through my email. I'd like to see that in hard copy and it be, I would have filled it out that way, but I'm not always on my phone.
Sure.
So there's so much data that's lost, so that's all skewed. I think if you would have put that on the survey, you would have got so many parents wanting their kids not to wear masks to school, but it wasn't there. It wasn't an option. So why? Kids should have been there.
No.
Yeah, I think we just need to make sure we cannot, by Iowa law, we can't rule on anything right here. Right, Ted? He's our board secretary. We are happy, well, it wasn't on the agenda, so we can't vote on it right now. I know, it is what it is, ma'am, Peg. It's just the way Iowa law is set up. We need 24 hours in order to put something on the agenda. It's a crazy rule, and Ted, maybe you can help with that. I mean,
Actually, we're past the open forum.
right, no, I know, and I know we're past the open forum, but if we're just giving opinions up here, I'm happy to. I'm happy to share, and it's fine. The board is comprised of 5 people with completely different opinions, and I can tell you that this has been the most difficult school year because I'm an empathetic guy, and I read faces, and with masks on, I can't read faces. So this has not been easy for me either. When the data comes out, Nathan, I take what you said there because I'm not scared of COVID, right? I'm not scared of COVID. But when you put me in charge of a facility that requires me to be worried about the most vulnerable in the entire facility, and all our public guidance is coming down, I have to rely on educators to help me understand how to run a school. I have to rely on the public data and the data and things that are coming out. And so we went to the mask mandate. It wasn't to go around anybody. It was because in July, we had things changing day by day by day, okay? And we didn't know what was going to happen or what was going to come out. If you remember the fear that was associated with this thing in April and March, we didn't know if on a surface that it would last 72 hours or if it lasts 6 weeks. We did not know the mortality rates at that point. We've been practicing healthcare for thousands of years, and that's why I went with the most conservative approach, right? Nathan, maybe that's a something, but when you put me in charge of making those responsibilities, I gotta be most concerned about the most vulnerable. And so when we went to a mask mandate, it was not to restrict anybody's ability, right? Secondly, when Sharon brought up the quarantine procedures have changed per CDC, per Iowa Public Health, right? They've changed. And so when me not wearing a mask can impact if Sarah gets the ability to go to school or not, that's unfair to her, right? I can take as long as the decision is my personal decision that it impacts me when not her, that's a different story, I think. And so that's why I stayed with the masks. I think the issue is getting a little bit less and less and less as the data comes out. Now, it's definitely gone from a global pandemic to a public or private decision. And Heather, we had this discussion. And it's not as dire. The data in the kids doesn't suggest it. I think I'm open for considering the option. But when you place something on my desk and say, I need to make a decision by the end of May, I mean, I am all for going mask optional, but to make a decision by May, when I was involved in the July decisions and we didn't know what was going down, and we were doing day by day by day, not knowing if we were able to have school, it makes me nervous. And I think it's irresponsible for me to make a decision in May for next school year. When that occurs, I don't know. So I know I'm wishy-washy, but I think we need to just consider it. I've already sent an email to Jeremy and Sharon saying, what are the implications if we do, right? And I'm trying to understand those. And as far as I understand it, the quarantine still applies. And at least for this school year, if we don't change those quarantine procedures, or if we can't somehow turn a blind eye like other districts are clearly doing, I'm hesitant to change by this school year because Sarah, I might have a negative impact on her ability to go to school. And I have 6 kids, and it was a complete, I agree with whoever said it, I think it was William Scott. It was a disaster. This last spring, it was a disaster. That I pledged we got to keep these kids in school. And if it requires a little uncomfortable wearing a mask, and that's, I was willing to give that up because it was a disaster at our house. I'll tell you, my kids fell back, and I don't want that to happen again. And so mine has always been the health and safety of the school, and then keeping kids in school, whether it's quarantining or not. And then we go down that list, it's getting less and less. My conviction on whether a mask is less and less, and I could be convinced either way. I mean, and this has done it great because what it does is it provides us feedback, right? And all the emails, whether the mask goes in or out, it is completely great because we get to know your opinions. We are elected officials, right? And we have to have your voice in here. So, I mean, put me on the spot and say, is a mask optional? Absolutely. I hope we go to mask optional next year. But to tell me to say I'm forced to make a decision, I think that's irresponsible. We're not making a decision with all the data. So that's my 2 cents on that. So I don't know. I don't know if it's.
I don't.
Get it? I just had that discussion with Miss Summers' mom. Sorry, I forget your name. Trust me, and I'll give you my number. The open forums. Yes, right. Yeah, and I'm happy. I'm happy to give my number out. It's on the website. Yep. I'm happy to. So,
I guess we. All right. I guess I'd like to quickly say that my opinion and my views were really rounded from last school year when school got shut down and all the kids are forced to be home, and some were virtual learning, some were not, and you saw the pain of what was going on. And when we went to the return to learn plan to come back for this school year, and I think I've said this to many of you that have reached out to me, my goal is to put butts in seats, get kids into the classroom any way we can. Masks were a tool to get there, and they have been a tool to get there. And I completely understand that some people don't agree with them, some people don't like them. There's some research out there that says that there's possible complications with it. Putting kids in the classroom, I believe, is the best way for them to learn. And the masks have helped with reducing the amount of excessive quarantines. And as long as the quarantine rules are in place the way they are right now, I'm going to really struggle to change my mind on that. It's not a fear thing. I'm comfortable not wearing a mask, but I want to keep kids in the classroom. I'm extremely optimistic, and I am going to be very aggressive in trying to make sure that next school year is mask optional. That is absolutely where I want to be. With that being 4 months away right now, that's a little tough to put my fist down and say, yeah, it's going to be no matter what, because we don't know what it's going to be, and I'm not going to put something out there without having some sort of facts or forecast of what's really going to happen. I mean, we didn't foresee what was going to happen the last 2 weeks in our school, and it was, that's affected a lot of kids' learning the last 2 weeks. So
They were not wearing masks, from what I understand.
I am not aware. I wasn't present.
There.
I think we need to revisit it. I do. I think we need to revisit it at the appropriate time. And deadlines that have been presented to us tonight, I don't know that I agree that those are appropriate. I do believe we have to give people the guidance and the foreknowledge before next school year. I mean, obviously that's going to have to happen. I'm with everybody. I hate the masks. I do. I don't like them. But I think for us to make a decision today or in May or whenever, that far in advance would be irresponsible. Because when we're talking about an event, an event could be good or bad. And, who knows what tomorrow's going to bring, let alone what 2 months from now is going to bring. So I think we ought to continue talking about it, and we ought to continue put it on the agenda for next month, and we'll talk about it. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be a decision next month, but it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
So so two things came out from, I think, the public forum. One is that I think there's a request that we have a public forum so people can voice opinions and have, I think, productive dialogue. So I would like to schedule a public forum around this for sometime in May, before our next meeting.
And then present what the forum...
And then what I'd like to do, and let parents talk about, and bring solutions, right? Bring ideas, knowing if this is what we're doing. And that's what I'd like to say. So by the May meeting, I would like to have some maybe ways to get the mask optional, even given our current guidance. Is it possible? And what could that possibly even look like? I don't know realistically if that's going to be feasible, but I would like to have the conversation with the administrative team and get public health a part of that conversation and just say, okay, if we did this, could we do this? And just get that ready to go so that if we are close and public health says, you know what, even if quarantine guidelines stayed the same, this option would work, then we could have it available at the end of May. But if not, I want to make sure we are doing due diligence and saying we are going to try everything we can to make that a factor. But if we get new guidance, here's my concern. Just speaking from the role I have, if we get new guidance in July, even if we put this in place and it changed the guidance we were given in May, and we have to change things in July, I want to make sure that we understand why that is. Because if we say in May, here's what I'd like to do to get kids in school with masks optional next year, and we put it out to the public and we all are in agreement, and then the event goes bad and we have to change that, I want to make sure that we understand that might have to happen in July if we get different guidance than what we have currently. And that's the only thing I would ask for consideration of, is because as we get new guidance, and we all lived that last year, and that is no joke, almost every day or every other day it was something new about food service or about janitorial cleaning or about this or about that. And so trying to get our heads around that and not knowing, and still not knowing even when we started August 23rd, I think was very challenging. But I think if we can go in saying, based on our guidance that we have now, here's the recommendation we want to try with masks optional, run it past public health, make sure we're fitting what we need to get that be the case, then I think we have to say, however, we will again look at this in July based on that guidance, and if it's the same, we're good to go. If it's not, then we have to have the conversation again.
So that everyone gets guidance, and then we get a little bit more definitive, everything. Okay.
Right.
Okay. You said your second one, or is that both? Sorry.
Say that again.
You said there's two. you said there was one public forum, and
I
then
think
just
that,
to
and then I
have,
would bring that to the board meeting.
gotcha.
So that so at the public forum, if people have ideas, they can bring them, we can work them through, we can talk public health before the next board meeting, and then we can bring a couple of options to the board meeting that we've already vetted through public health, and hopefully have some definitives based on where we are currently, knowing that we'll revisit it again in July based on the guidance at that time. Hopefully it'll be less, but maybe it'll be more, who knows? But just know that we have kind of that structure so that if we do have changes, we know that we're going to have to address them when the time comes and let people know in July. I mean, that's what I would propose based on feedback, but
You're talking the May meeting, not
the May
July
meeting, correct.
Not July.
Do the recommendations in May based on what we currently know, see if it's even feasible, and then revisit it in July based on whatever the guidelines are at that time.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
So you'll work on scheduling a forum
Yes.
meeting
Yeah.
in the auditorium here?
Correct.
Because this will be the place.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, was there any other questions on the presentation of the return to learn data? Not hearing any, we now will take your committee feedback on the virtual learning.
Yeah, so we had, I would say, probably 20 people, maybe 18 people on the team. And we've talked about this before. I was, focused on our kids. We have kids that want to think of this as a possibility. I think we need to talk about it and talk about it in earnest. But I also understand we came up, we talked about the enrollment numbers, we talked about the breakdown from the survey, knowing that it wasn't, everybody, it was 268 families, knowing that we only had 6 families that were currently scheduled to possibly be enrolling into another system. So the committee came up with a couple of things, just things for considerations, and they were big things like, if we put our name on it, we want it to be well done. If we are putting our name on it saying this is an I-35 virtual academy, we want it to be well done. And I think that was across the board consensus. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We talked about it couldn't look like it did this year. We can't ask teachers to do that. We can't ask parents to do that. It would have to be its own thing, meaning it can't take away from our supports that we currently have in school. So those are all some of the conversations, and I shared kind of our talking points with you, and included some of those on the email communication that I sent last week. So the recommendation from the committee is that while we understand that there might be a need for this from some people, we don't feel, number one, that we can do it by August 24th at the level that we want to do it. We do understand that this might be a challenge for families, but we know that they have options that they can attend that are not us. I think everybody's in agreement that we need to focus on how we're doing what we're doing here, because even next year we're going to have transition things. And so that's kind of the reasons why I think that the committee is recommending that we not do anything with virtual learning. I would be remiss in my job if I didn't think we need to visit it again in the future. I think that there's a need for some of this. I articulated that with the board, with the committee. I think our culture is changing. I think education is changing, but at the expense of what? And I think that's really where the committee was, at the expense of what? And I think that's a really valid way to consider it. So I do think that future, we should probably look at it again, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. But right now, I don't think we're in a position where the committee would recommend doing anything this year. I will say that the committee gave us a great list of what they call successful components for virtual learning. We do offer some classes virtually. We have in the past. And so I would like to, my recommendation, so the committee is not do anything for this next year and maybe visit it sometime in the future, 3, 5 years, something like that. My recommendation is to look at the things that we currently offer, compare them to that list of what the expectations are for what we would want in a virtual program, and see if even what we're offering now fits in that mold. And if it doesn't, do we need to change it, or do we need to not offer them? And so I think that would be my recommendation based on where we are. So that's just a kind of for your information. So I would need you to let me know if you want me to put anything on the agenda for next month around that topic as well.
So just a quick high-level question. Right now, we are administering virtual learning because of, I mean, really, it was enacted because of COVID, right?
Yes, we were told we had to have a virtual option.
So, and we all recognize that it could be better, needs to have some improvements.
Correct.
So we're saying we're not proceeding with this, which I agree with, but if we're required to continue to deliver virtual learning next year, we have 4 months to do something, right?
Correct.
Is there anything that this committee worked on that's really going to be able to push to help make that
No,
better?
that's not what I tasked them.
That was outside the scope of the committee.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
because I just wanted to find out if there was even any interest in needing to do it.
Okay.
So when that was, no, we weren't going to get, we'll get a committee of
educators
that would work through that if we
Okay.
need to, because they're obviously the ones who are
Right.
living it, so.
And that would be improving the current processes that we have. Improving or
Well,
changing.
no, we wouldn't be able to do the same thing that we did this year.
Right.
We would have to have a whole different option.
Mhm.
And I don't, unless we're told by the state that we have to, I don't anticipate that we would do that.
Do you anticipate them telling us we may have to do it?
No, I honestly don't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right.
I think if anything, they might open the open enrollment date again for virtual, so that if a family, let's say in May, we come up with what we're gonna do, and a family who wants everybody to be masked, decides they don't wanna be in that environment, and they need to make a decision to go someplace where everybody's masked or they need to be virtual. If we don't offer that, I think they might open it for something like that says you can be past the March deadline. I think that might be, I've not heard any conversation that they're going to require us to do virtual next year.
That's good to know.
Yes,
I appreciate that.
yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you for looking into it, and thanks Katie and Kelsey for being so active on the committee. It is very good to have that type of support, so thank you.
Is there any other questions for Ms. Detlinger on the committee feedback on virtual learning?
I do. So if you're talking about not repeating what we went through this year as far as remote learning, in your mind, what is your initial thought as far as outsourcing it if it's necessary, or what's your initial thought?
No, I think that we would just sign off on open enrollment for those kids to go to a program that already is established.
Okay.
I think as a board, you'd have to commit to that.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's past the deadline, because the education program they want is not available here for good cause, we could sign off on that. And I think you just have to be willing to say, you know what, we don't offer it here, but they have it, and we can connect families with those options. But I do think that we would have to agree that if we're not going to offer that, which I don't think we can, then we have to put it on that we're gonna say, okay, then you can go to a different district. I just think you have to be okay with that.
I agree.
So
I guess I've come up with a question as well. There's virtual academies that exist
correct.
currently, limited number, I believe.
Increasing, but yes.
Increasing.
Yep.
Are we aware of other school districts that are moving in that direction right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm gonna guesstimate because I don't have that file in front of me. When I first came to Iowa 25 years ago, there were 2 in the state.
And those are probably the 2 I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And they've been doing it for a long, long time. And then last year, we had an increase. So Des Moines Community went on, I think, 3 years ago. And we had, because the state limits the number of people who get a waiver to do it. And so this year, they sent something out in February, I want to say. And the number of schools that are doing it now is about 17 or 18. So it has increased pretty significantly. And I think for obvious reasons, because they've already got a structure in place and they're going to convert it to whatever they need to make it work for families. So there are more but not kind of locally. I don't think there's any districts around us that are considering it as an option.
Well, I definitely think that we need to add it to next month's agenda to be clear-cut about whether we're going to have it or not.
Okay. Yep, I'll put that on.
All right. That takes us to the facilities report. Mr. Gray's here.
Yep.
Are you ready yet, Rick? Do you want us to give you one more time?
I'm just going to run through some stuff that we're going to be trying to hammer out this summer.
You're going to have to get closer, Rick.
A little closer.
Yeah.
How's that?
Is it on?
Jeffy?
I wonder if Jeff.
Technical.
Testing.
There you go.
Close?
That's good.
All right. I'm going to try to just go over some things that we're going to try to knock out this summer. Our normal things is like refinishing gym, extracting carpets, replacing some of them in classrooms, scrub and recoat the CT or VC tile, paint areas of need, replace seam tile, anything damaged and soiled, cleaning air handler units, replacing the filters, and work order requests from staff. We get some from the staff that are needs and wants, and we focus on the needs. Sorry. Looking at trying to add more controls for Havoc. We're still a little lack on that, and it's a little ways to go. Updating smoke detectors. When this the 80 building was built, everything was sectioned in zones, and so anytime we had an addition, they put annunciating detectors in, smoke detectors, heat detectors. So a lot of times we get a fire drill or something like that. There's times that we find out it's telling us in 2 or 3 different places where the detector's off. So that would shorten up quite a bit of time. The annunciating detectors actually tell you exactly what room it's in, location and stuff. We need to replace a hot water storage tank in the high school boiler room that supplies the kitchens. We need to install a fire suppression system to the CT shop paint booth. We need to repair the kitchen floor, the receiving floor with the epoxy flooring. We got some broken down sidewalks that are needing repair for safety. We got the EFS around the middle school elementary part of the building that you can see it's really badly stained. I've got a company looking into that. They think they got them some stuff that'll seal it up, and it looks really nice. Makes it a new finished look. The track lines out here on their track are needing repainted. That's going to be later on this year. Some chain link fence replacement. The south interior wall of the fitness center is starting to show a little moisture. So I know we got some water coming in. I imagine right along that base of some of them big windows that we're looking into. And the north exterior wall of the wrestling room, I believe it was back when, it's been a few superintendents ago, we was going to start this retuck pointing because we had a lot of moisture in our bricks. And with the labor cost of retuck pointing and replacing certain Spalding bricks, they found out it was going to cost just a touch more if they just took all the bricks off and re-bricked it. And the only thing that wasn't touched was the north exterior wall of that wrestling room. That's something we need to address. Other than that, that's a small list.
That's it?
Is
Are you
this a
looking
norm?
for more projects?
What's that?
Are you looking for more projects?
I think we've got our hands full.
Is this a normal summer list? It seems really extended.
There's a lot more. This is just some of the high points.
Yeah. And with shorthanded, are you going to be able to meet this? I mean, is it?
Absolutely.
All right.
No.
I like to hear that.
That's our goal.
Did we have any? I saw in the announcements, students for the summer help, things like that. Obviously, they're not helping with like the north outer wall of the wrestling room, but
No. The thing is, we've got, we always look forward for student help. We do have some faculty. We got 5 or 6 faculty members that jump on board, which is amazing. The student help, the thing that hurts us, I've probably got over a half a dozen 15-year-olds that have just loved to work, but, we kind of run into the child labor laws. And so we got to have, if the kids would just lie and say they were 16 and 17. But that's kind of, where we get kind of kicked around. I mean, I'd love to have them, but that's kind of where that stops. And then we got, I think, was it 18-year-old, you can actually run something like a lawnmower or a weed eater and something like that. But I think I've got 3 and possibly 4 students that are going to jump on.
I think one of the reasons, I have to wait 3 seconds. I think one of the reasons why we have maybe a little bit more exhaustive list is because we've been almost 18 months without a maintenance man or woman, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously one of the reasons for the job fair is to try and get some of those positions so that we don't get backed up and try and jam everything into the summer. So.
Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
Thank you.
all right. That takes us to the sharing agreement, Southeast Warren, Transportation Director and Maintenance Director. This does require a motion, a second, and a vote to approve the sharing agreement with the Southeast Warren Community School District. Sharon, can you share some of the background information for us?
Yeah, this is one of those agreements where we do get to count students in the agreement. I think the legislature came out with these several years ago to help districts offset cost, but also share services. So we might not need a full-time curriculum director, but we need a half-time curriculum director that we can share with another district. So we divide days. Same thing with maintenance. We might not need a full-time maintenance person. We might need a day of maintenance at our facility in addition to our custodial. And so these are 2 sharing agreements that we have with Southeast Warren. We have 2. One is a transportation director and one is the maintenance director. So we own the maintenance director contract and Southeast Warren owns the transportation director contract. In digging into those a little bit, I had some concerns about the way that the Southeast Warren transportation director contract was written. And in essence, what we do is we pay a district for the time that we're buying. So if we want somebody 1 day a week, we pay 20% of that person's contract. We from the state get weighted dollars so that we can offset that cost. So there's an incentive to share instead of having a whole full-time position. So we get 8 hours a week from the transportation director from Southeast Warren, and we pay that 20%. At one time, the contract had written into it that we, as I-35, pay an additional $10,000. Not for any additional hours, but just that we would pay an additional $10,000. And so I wanted to know why, because that's an anomaly. That's not typical. And so in talking to the superintendent, the question was, well, this person on their staff has a full plate, as most educators or people in education do. So he, I think, has a bus route, and he has maintenance, and he does transportation, and so he's got kind of a lot on his plate. Well, the intent is that they didn't want to reduce his hours, but they wanted to go into the sharing agreement with us. So in order to offset those hours, they asked us to pay an extra $10,000. Well, my challenge with that is we're already paying for the day that we get him. And if Southeast Warren wants to use him for extra services, then I think it really falls on them to do that. Just as if we were to ask our maintenance person to do an extra bus route, it would fall on us to do that. And so I think that there's a real a question of why is it written that way. When I did talk to the superintendent over there, he's in agreement that we can do a time audit and see if we use that person for just one day. If we use them for more than one day, then we want to make sure we're being fair about that. And so if we do a time audit over the course of the next 8 months, come back and visit this, then next year we can write a contract that really reflects what we're receiving and also what we're expecting. And so my recommendation is we agree that, because the current contract is for 2 years for the transportation director and the maintenance director. Their board has already signed off on both of them. My recommendation would be we sign off on the maintenance director position for 2 years, because we're both in agreement on that. And I would recommend that the transportation director contract we sign off on for a year, and then evaluate the time and make sure that we're in agreement with that extra money if we need to pay it, or if we need to come up with a better solution, maybe another day in the contract or something like that.
So we don't actually know, unless we do the time audit, whether or not we're getting any bang for the buck for the 10 grand extra.
Correct.
Okay. Because Southeast Warren did not reduce the responsibilities or the
Correct.
time required.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
How long has this arrangement been going as far as the stipend?
Before me, so I'm looking at Ted.
Yeah, would it be like 4 years ago?
Okay.
Do we come out,
And it was in incremental steps.
The
So it was
10,000.
like 5,000
Okay.
to start with, and then it crept up to 10,000.
Okay.
And that was known at the time.
do we come out money ahead with the sharing agreement even as is?
Yeah, not much, but yes.
Not much?
Yeah. Yep, which is why I think
We
it's
do
never
get
been
lot
a,
of service from it.
yes. Yeah.
It's a plus.
Yeah, we don't want to not have the agreement. We just want to be fair in how we're
Right.
either being asked to pay for it or what we're getting as a result of it. So that's what I'm asking us to evaluate over the course of the next year.
And Southeast Warren is open to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, their superintendent is. I think that their board agreed to the 2 year, but we would send it back and just say we want to do 1 and see if they'll agree to that.
Okay.
Is there any questions or any other comments? This does require a motion and a second before we vote.
I'll move to approve the sharing agreements with Southeast Warren Community School District.
I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve.
Can I clarify that you're going to recommend the 1 only for 1 year? Or do you want me to do it for 2 years?
I read what was written.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Can I amend my movement?
Go right ahead.
I move to approve the sharing agreements with Southeast Warren Community School District based on a 2-year contract for the Director of Maintenance position and a 1-year contract for the Transportation Director position.
And I'll still second that.
As the maker of the motion, that amendment is automatically accepted, and it's been seconded. All those in favor of, could you read your motion one more time? Ted?
I have.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. Now we have a retirement severance package to discuss.
So based on our current enrollment numbers for various factors, it's the recommendation that we reduce our secondary vocal music position half-time. And so when we visited about this with our current employee in that position, he had previously asked about a retirement package. The challenge was he's served, after this year, served in the district for 14 years, and our retirement package in January required 15 years of service. And so just in conversations and because of how we've created that retirement package, I recommend that we allow that, what I would call a special retirement package for this employee so that his contract is not reduced from full-time to half-time. We advertise and we have advertised as a tentative to see if we would have any interest, because I wouldn't recommend this unless we had a high-quality person to come in. And so I think Mr. Castor is comfortable with the applicants that we have, that we can make a quality hire at a half-time position. I think ultimately the goal is obviously to build this program, and there's lots of reasons why over the last 4 or 5, 6 years that we've had this decline. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out, is how is it our schedule? Is it kids involved in multiple activities? What is kind of causing less interest in vocal programs than we've had in the past? So when I was asked about this from the employee, I felt okay about putting it on the board. I think that the same intent is there as we offered for our other retirees. I do think it's important to know that this, because it happens after April 1st, and according to Iowa code, it cannot be taken out of the management fund. It has to be taken out of the general fund. And so I just want to make sure you're all aware of that, because it's not the same fund as our retirement package, which is why it's severance/retirement. It's based on the same guidelines that we used for our retirement package, but because it's not before April 1st, according to Iowa code, we can't offer it out of management fund. So.
Does it do anything to our financial metrics, like the spending authority or anything?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Given that it's coming out of the different bucket, does it do anything to spending authority or anything differently than it would out of the management fund?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So you'd be advertising for a halftime for next
Correct.
year? I just have a problem with that, because I feel like we are our own problem with that. I mean, prior to last year with the COVID, we had, I believe it was 38 students in Mr. Webster's class. And then at some point, I know we, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we cut the 5th and 6th grade choir. Do we not? Mr. Castor? This is the first year that we cut 5th and 6th grade? Okay. So that would really, in essence, contribute to the decline in enrollment in Mr. Webster's class. But my point is, I was on the committee which created this auditorium, this wonderful auditorium, the CTE, and expanded the fine arts location. It was just a few years ago, a couple of years ago, that those areas were were thriving. There was at least 30-some kids in those programs. And we did it to expand the fine arts in order to accommodate the growth. But here we are in less than 2 years, we're cutting down that position in half. And I feel like it's our own doing, because of not only COVID, but we're cutting electives where kids don't have the choice but to take core courses, which, yes, that's understandable. But then if they can't take electives because they're cut, then again, we're contributing to the decline in enrollment in those fine arts areas. So to me, we're just being too drastic in cutting it half-time right now because of the circumstance we're in. Why not give it another year? I mean, I just hate to see a position being cut and then having to walk that back, because it's harder to try to figure out money later on when we do need a full-time pay. I don't want us to get used to having it just a part-time pay and then be in need of it later. And by the way, I don't have a problem with supporting Mr. Webster's early retirement. It's just the problem I have is with cutting it down to half-time.
And I would agree with you, Cindy, on almost everything in that. Part of the conversations I've had with Ms. Detlinger has been my desire to see the fine arts not just grow, but grow exponentially. You know, that was the premise of why we even started the conversations about the auditorium, because we thought we were ill-serving at that time by having to lay the blue tarp out on the gym floor to do any kind of activity, you know, whether it be musicals or whatever. And we've seen those things grow by leaps and bounds. I think we've done a good job with that. But if the numbers right now in the music department and the choral classes is so low, you know, we have to figure out how to build that. And I don't know the answer. I think there's a lot of ideas going.
But is it because we cut it? Because we cut the electives, such as giving them the opportunity and the time to go to band. So that's why the enrollment is down. That's what I'm saying, is the correlation with that.
I think what we're really asking for is we need to do some type of root cause analysis as far as why is the enrollment reduced. Is it schedule? Is it lack of access? Or is it they're just not interested? Right. And I don't know I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if you guys do or not.
I mean, do you want to address that, or you want me to? Okay, and if I misspeak, make sure you say something. Mm-hmm. I think it's all of those. Mm-hmm. I think that as we look at how we look at our programs, we have to think about how do we build from young up, mm-hmm. right? So how do we build from 5th and 6th grade up to 7th and 8th and 9th and 10th? Because we know that as they get into 11th and 12th, they typically don't pick up activities like that in a schedule. It's just not typically how kids build their schedules. I do think that there has been some challenges based on the courses that we've offered about having kids participate. I know that one of the classes we offered was a vocal class that then performed the drama or the musical. And if you weren't in the vocal class, you wouldn't be allowed to participate in the musical. I think that took some of our kids out of the equation. I think when we look at the schedule for 5th and 6th grade, and we look at, you know, how much time we have in a day, I think the intent is to bring 5th and 6th grade back this next year. But I think what we realized is if we put 5th and 6th grade back in, we put 7th and 8th grade back in, we're still having some of our high school kids, when the classes are butting up, we see that in every area, where you have one period where they're offering, let's say, physics, and if you have a music class opposite of that, sometimes physics is weighing out. So we're seeing that in our CTE programs, and part of that's our size. We want to offer as many options to kids as we can. The challenge is that we only have one teacher for those programs, and so there are going to be conflicts in the schedule naturally as a result of that. So I think some of it is student choice. So making sure we have access for young students, making sure we try and work with the schedule to make sure there's student choice, I think are all things that we can do. When we look at this year, and granted, not an ideal year, but we look at, you know, trying to be innovative with what we're doing. We've talked about having our vocal program and some of our CTE programs offering a period between that 8 and 9 time. So that if you're not wanting to take a study hall, but you want to take those classes, we can put it in during that time, which then doesn't have a conflict with any of those core classes. So I think as we look at increasing 5th and 6th grade, and we have 7th and 8th grade, and we have the kids that we currently have signed up for the classes, and I'm just going by the first blush of this that comes out at the end of March, beginning of April, we had less than 10 kids signed up for all of the classes that were offered. I can't in what I do justify a full-time position for that, knowing that we have steady enrollment with open enrollment. If you look at our current number of kids in our district, it's declining. I want the fine arts program to grow as well, but I also have to make recommendations based on what we have as far as numbers. And you're exactly right, we do want to have that grow, but right now that's not what our numbers are telling us. So if we want to keep that position as a full-time, I mean, you direct me, I'm making the recommendation. If you want me to keep that position as a full-time, we'll work that out. We're just not going to have somebody in those classes. And that's where my concern is that if I'm being fiscally responsible, then I have to make that recommendation, whether I want it to be everybody participating or not. And so I don't take this decision lightly. I've been talking to Jeremy about it for 3 or 4 weeks. But I also know that part of my job and Ted's job is as that program builds, that we do find the allocated funds for that. I can't make the recommendation with less than 10 kids in that program to support a full-time position. So that's where I kind of, all of those apply. We're working to figure out how to eliminate some of those restrictions, but currently that's where we're sitting with numbers.
And I think that's one thing I guess I'd request is, whether it be in the next couple months, have something that you can bring back to us and say, this is kind of an action plan on how we think we can offer students the opportunity to boost the enrollment of this program. We can't make kids go out for choir, but we can give them an opportunity and make sure that they have that opportunity, and there's something to be, there's access and excitement towards it. So.
And I reached out to Sharon today about this very issue, and I said I think hopefully the people that have applied as possible or anticipated will help us be able to see some of those things too. And I like your idea, Roger, of having that recommendation to come back to, okay, what can we do to build that back up, because it's vital. There's studies of how fine arts impact the education of a person, and we need to have that offered.
Yep.
I'm fine with Roger's request on that.
Okay.
And I guess I would like to ask that we maybe do that September, October, so that if we do reduce this to a half-time, the person that's coming in, who starts in August, has some time to be a part of those conversations.
That makes sense.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. So I'll say probably September or October, and we can talk about it as we get closer.
All right, is there any other discussion on the retirement severance package? Not hearing any, we would need a motion and a second before we could take action to vote on that.
I move we approve the retirement severance package for Mr. David Webster.
And I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the retirement severance package for Mr. David Webster. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Next issue is the board policy dress code. This does require a motion and a second before we can take action to vote on the reading.
So I'll just give a little bit of background, and Steve, jump in. You probably should come to the mic since you're the one that deals with this mostly. But one of the things that we're kind of struggling with is what is the expectation for students in wearing hats in the building? And this probably started around, I would say, October in earnest, where we had tried different things to enforce the dress code about hats. And so the challenge we were having is, and I think Mr. Castor can explain this better than I can. We would see a student come in the building, we would ask them to take their hat. So Mr. Castor would collect them in his office. If a student would walk past me, have their hat on, I'd ask them, please remove your hat. And they would remove their hat and move through the hallways. And we have staff that very much were in agreement with that. The challenge that I think we're seeing is kind of twofold. We have lots of venues in our school where people can wear hats. That it sets kind of to me, a question of why is it okay in some instances where we're an institution of learning and not in others. I actually went online and looked at the etiquette for when hats should be allowed, because I don't know all the guidance for that, and I don't know where it came from, and so I did a little research in that, and it said things like sporting events, it's fine to wear a hat, whether it's indoor or outdoor. Common areas, if you're in a public entity, common areas, it's acceptable to wear a hat inside or, it's just, that's kind of the norm. But when you get into some of these environments, the question is, are we putting forth kind of what the societal expectations are with the policy? Now, I think part of, and I was not here when the policy was written, I've been in other districts where this has been a conversation. I think that stems from it's easier to manage and say either all or none, right? It's easier to say, you can wear a hat anywhere or you can wear a hat nowhere. That's pretty easy to manage. I think I asked staff last week, I sent the information out to parents, and I had asked in the office, I said, have we had anybody come in that are not following the guidelines with the hats that we put in place? And there was nobody sent to the office because they weren't respecting the hat process that we have in place. Having said that, I wanted to get feedback from teachers who we were asking, if you don't want your student to wear a hat in the classroom, just set that expectation. And I wanted to know how that was going. So I asked teachers, staff, anybody that wanted to come into my office and visit with me about it. So I had a handful of people come in, and I think the biggest challenge was it's a matter of respect. And I think we all agree with, in a learning environment, there's a question of, should we have a level of respect that says, when you come into a classroom, and I would have people that argue with me, when you come into the school building, should you automatically take your hat off? And I think that there's two camps in that currently in our building. There's the camp that says, yep, hats off, we're in an educational center, the hat comes off, and we enforce it. But then on the other side, I get the same conversation, it doesn't really bother me if they have a hat on. And those are our staff. So we don't have consensus even among our staff of what that should be. So I asked everybody who came in and talked to me, I said, so what do you think the intent of this is? What do you think the intent of the dress code is? Is it to teach kids when it's appropriate to wear a hat and when it's not? Or is it just to say no hats, which is what it currently says? And I think everybody would agree it's easier to manage if it's just no hats. But I think there's a conversation to be had about they need to understand, students need to understand and learn when it's appropriate and when it's not. I don't know that we have a clear answer on this about what our staff even wants as we make a recommendation to the board. The one thing I would say is in the conversations, one of the teachers came back with an idea that I'd like to throw out for you to consider as you kind of debate this topic. And that was, instead of it reading, hats are allowed in common areas, which mean our cafeteria and our hallways, and then at the discretion of the teacher in the classrooms, flip that and say, no hats in the classrooms unless the teacher says it's okay, right? So instead of putting the onus on the teacher, it's an educational environment, hats are off in the classroom, unless the teacher says you can wear your hat in here. Now, I don't know, I think that just says we're respecting that learning environment. If we want to go with no hats anywhere in the building, that's fine too. I just think we as an administrative team then have to figure out what that looks like for implementation, because it's not consistent. It's really hard, I think, to expect an administrative team of 1 or 2 or 3 and a handful of teachers that are really passionate about that to be the only ones that are enforcing it. So then I have to look at it and say, okay, if the recommendation is from the board, no hats, then we have to regroup how we're going to enforce that. But I also look at it the other side and say, if they can go into any public facility and wear a hat, and then when they go into the place of learning or whatever it is, they have to take their hat off, you know, what are we trying to do with it? So I see both sides. Mr. Castor, do you want to talk a little bit, since you're the one who deals with this most often?
So we talked about this in the October PD, which was, we discussed it with the staff of the challenges. And I think the year has presented many challenges, but this was yet another thing for us to try and patrol. So when we discussed it in October, we talked about, you know, staff pitching in, making sure you're in the hallways and what the expectation is. And as the months drew on, the challenge continued to exist. There were hats in the hallways. When I would walk around the corner, kids would take their hats off. When Sharon would walk around the corner, kids would take their hats off. And then they'd walk around the next corner and put it right back on. And so the challenge was just never ending. And to what cause? I don't know. I don't know what the change was this year. Kids didn't have lockers checked out to them, so maybe that could have been it. But that was done as part of a strategy for a return to learn group. So it again became one of those other things that was impacting the day and taking time from other things in the midst of monitoring masks and lunch and social distancing and all of the other things that we've been asked to do. So that's how the decision was made. In communication with Sharon, we decided that we were going to offer this as an option in common spaces and see what the results were there. And so it was communicated with staff as well in the March PD, and that's when it was implemented. So communication's been had there, and again, as Sharon alluded to, there hasn't been any issues since then, and as far as hats being a problem. And so obviously that's part of the conversation here tonight. But recommendations, I'm certainly open to whatever the board suggests. I think we will have to figure out how to monitor or how to patrol based on what your guys' recommendation is.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the concern with safety? Because I think that the concern with safety.
Sure. The concern with safety has been brought up a couple times. I think the labor management group was the last group to send something out, but the concern for safety was brought up about identifying a student. And I think the challenge this year is we have all of our students in masks. We have all of our teachers in masks. So it's extremely hard to identify anybody, as Eddie had shared earlier. So you put a hat on top of that. Does it increase? Yes, I think it increases. Does it make it unable for us to know who our kids are? I would disagree with that. I think we know who our kids are when they come in the building. So I have talked with the emergency manager about to what extent do we address the safety piece. I really think that comes down to what do we have as far as resources to be able to patrol or to be able to implement. And so that's obviously the piece for us to discuss based on your recommendation.
So I'll give my 2 cents on this. I've given this a lot of thought, and initially, I'm just thinking we're talking hats. We've got COVID, we've got masks, we've got remote learning, we're talking about hats. So, I didn't want to trivialize it by just not giving it enough thought, but as I was thinking about it more and more, first of all, I took the board policy as meaning wearing hats, or not being able to wear hats just during the school day. I did not consider, it as being a part of extracurricular that you are not able to wear a hat. I mean, I don't have a problem with that being like, say, at a basketball game or a football game. I'm talking about not wearing hats just during the school day. So I got to thinking, so how many students are the ones that are wearing hats in school? Can you tell me that? Roughly 20, 30 kids that are doing that? Okay. Okay. Well, my point is, so we're considering changing a school board policy that's been in place for a long time, and each of us that have been in school, I'm sure everyone up here has had to adhere to no hats. At least I know in my school, I'm sure everyone else has. So the few amount of kids versus the whole student body that is continually defying the school board policy of wearing a hat, we're making a judgment call to maybe change it because of them continually doing this. I have a problem with that. And my other thought is, you know, you can make the argument that we spend too much time on policing the hat as opposed to spending more time on the learning aspect. But I see it as we're actually teaching them and learning and giving them guidance as to when it is not appropriate, and it's definitely in the school environment. It is a board policy, it is in the student handbook, and so that is something that they have to adhere to. It's no different than a couple of years from now, whether it's juniors, seniors, whatnot, they're going into the workforce. They're going to have to abide by the employment practices of that particular organization. And there will be employee handbooks that also have dress code and guidelines. So at the risk of being fired because you're not adhering to those same code of conduct or dress code, then I think we need to start with enforcing it here so that they understand there are consequences to continually disobeying that. I mean, I was thinking as far as maybe start off with the first warning. You know, when they walk in the school building, if you see them wearing a hat, hey, turn around, go back to your car, and leave it in the car. There's no reason for them to be wearing it around, whether they're in this building and then going over to the CTE building and back. There's just no reason for them to have it in their possession. Just turn right around and go and leave it in your vehicle. Second warning, maybe it's cause for detention or Saturday school. Third warning, remote learning for 3 days. Those are just some suggestions, but I just see that it makes sense. They drive to school, and these are high school kids, right? They're not little kids that you have to continually tell them to take your hat off all the time. These are high school kids that are ready to go into the world in whether it's the next 4 years, 3 years, 2 or 1. They should know how to abide by the rules that are set in place and learn from it, because that's going to be the expectation in the workforce. So why not teach them now? That's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. I'll be honest, I didn't put much mental effort into hats in the last week. I felt like there's a lot more important things in front of us, and I am not prepared to vote on changing a longstanding board policy at this point.
All right. So, go ahead. There's a couple ways we can handle this. Mm-hmm. We can accept a motion. We don't need a motion for it to stay the same, for the hat policy to stay what it had been.
Right. Yep.
So,
no motion is necessary.
We could accept a motion to change it if that's what somebody wants, or it could just die from lack of a motion.
Yep.
So, at this time, go ahead.
Can we move to table it so that we can have some time to really put some effort into it?
I think if it dies tonight for a lack of a motion or lack of support, then it could be brought up again at any point.
Okay.
So if there's no other conversation or discussion about it, I would entertain a motion to amend the policy on hats. Dress code number 502.1, student appearance. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion? Motion dies for lack of support.
Okay.
So, all right. That brings us to the end of the agenda. The next meeting, the regular board meeting, will be May 24th, 2021. There will be a closed session at 5:15 for an evaluation, and then there will be a 6 p.m. regular board meeting. And then the reminder on the back here says graduation will be May 23rd, 2021 at 2 p.m., which will be a great day.
Yep.
Is that outside or in here?
In the gym.
In the gym.
In the gym.
In the gym. Yep.
Is
In
what
the
the
gym.
plan is. So, all right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we are in adjournment. All those in favor, signify by aye.
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 Aye, opposed? All right, thank you, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for coming and sticking around with us for
Thank you.
Thank you.
3 hours and 20 minutes.